This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
You are about to witness an evolution. On each episode, we will take a deep dive into the career of a legendary wrestling superstar, looking at all of the elements that led to and contributed to their long-term success. With your host, Andy Atherton.
Place to Be Nation Wrestling Network. Welcome to The Evolution. We are back with our latest episode with a legendary wrestler being profiled and a great guest breaking down that career of that person. Who is this guest? Well, he is one part of the shrink-wrapped crew over on the North-South Connection. On this very feed, he is part of Talking WCW and PTB NXT. And on the Jenny position, he is part of that crew for the Journey Through Infinity and one half of Talk and Pop. Plus, you can hear him on many shows on this, not this, but on the Pop feed. My friend, your friend, everybody's friend, the Tim Capel. Tim, how are you tonight?
I'm quite well. I try to be everyone's friend, at least. But yeah, fun to be making an appearance here, guest slot on The Evolution. Looking forward to evolving with you, Andy, here on Place B Nation.
That's my hope. On every episode, I try to evolve from not remembering anything to sort of remembering stuff. So
yeah,
that's my
goal. Challenge for all of us. I find that I forget more and more, and things that I thought were really committed to memory, right? And I'm like, I'll be looking back on, I don't know, either something I wrote or notes from like a way old podcast because I'm, trying to get somewhat organized, and I'm like, I completely forgot that I ever knew this in the first place with some of these subjects. So we'll see how I do here tonight.
It's so funny. Like I listen to people talking about wrestling and stuff, and I have watched it pretty much religiously for the most part since I was 14. Yeah. That's 30 somewhat years plus, and I watched all the Monday Night Wars. I watched, and it's like I'm like, really, that happened? And then all of a sudden somebody will say one thing. I'm like, oh my God, I remember that. So
yeah, it was? Sorry, it just jumped into my head. Here we go. Maybe my memory's improving. Prime example, someone mentioned the Gemini, the tag team.
Yes.
And also like the Basham brothers and Linda Miles and their weird like BDSM gimmick that they had. This was like mid 2000s SmackDown, and I was just like, I know I knew this at some point. I have literally zero recollection of who the Gemini were. Wait, were they a different team from the Bashams? Because it kind of sounds like the same gimmicks, but apparently it was different. I was like,
yeah, I think that was
I knew this
Survivor Series.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. That someone was. So,
amazingly, that I, of all people, would remember the Gemini.
Yeah. Well,
and Linda Miles.
We can't sell so short here, all right? I mean, Go on.
Yeah. All right. So, Tim, who did you pick to talk about in depth on Evolution tonight?
All right. Call me a mock, but I had to go with my guy who I think I've talked about on like 3 dedicated podcasts at this point as of this episode. I just keep coming back to him, and that is Diamond Dallas Page, the jewel of the Jersey Shore. DDP was kind of instrumental in getting me back into wrestling. I've told the story a million times. In the late 90s, I just really took to his rise. That babyface push that he got. So we'll get into all that. But he's the guy I really responded to when wrestling heated back up in the Monday Night Wars era and the Attitude era, and you're flipping channels and sort of picking your favorites. I'm like, oh, who's this guy? Never heard of him. Pretty cool. And just sucked me right back in. He's a big, big part of probably why I'm still a fan today, quite honestly.
Yeah, a stalwart of WCW during the Monday Night Wars. He's up there with Flair and Sting being on that side and Hogan, he was the main babyface for a long time. And then, he did his heel turn and all that stuff, featured in Reign Rumble. But yeah, Page, and then he famously comes over to, the WWE after they bought WCW as basically the biggest name that didn't sit out the contract. He wasn't, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Goldberg, whoever. No, they got Page, and he tried to do the best he can, and we'll talk about it later. But ultimately, his WWE run was not the best.
Not especially memorable. It has its moments.
No, I mean, yeah, there's memorable lines and a few memorable moments, but generally, I like to remember him for WCW.
Yeah,
that's my personal feeling. So let's get started at the beginning. Dallas Page was born Page Joseph Falkenberg, April 5th in 1956 in Point Pleasant, New Jersey. Like you said, the pride of the Jersey Shore. He attended high school in Toms River, which I've been through. It's actually near where my family has a home in New Jersey.
Huh?
Was a basketball player, briefly went to Coastal Carolina University in South Carolina, and then started working full-time afterwards. He ran a nightclub in Fort Myers, Florida called Norma Jean's, known for its pink Cadillac, while he was working there as a wrestling manager for the AWA. He then started managing in 1988, where he handled Bad Company, which was Paul Diamond and Pat Tanaka, a team he led to the AWA Tag Team Championship. Bad Company is often accompanied by valets known as Diamond Dolls, and during his time with AWA, he also managed Colonel De Beers, Kurt Hennig, and Medusa Michelli as leader of the Diamond Exchange stable. And then he worked, basically he was there for about 12 dates over a period of 9 months and they filmed all the television shows in one day. So Tim, do you remember or have you seen or do you remember his AWA work as a manager? I briefly have recollection of some of his stuff. So
yeah, and these are not exactly the golden days of the AWA either. So not a period that I think is well remembered, if remembered at all, by most fans. I've seen bits and pieces of it. I think it's more interesting in theory than probably in practice. Just this idea that he's managing all these different personalities with the exception of, I guess, Bad Company. He would kind of circle back around and would be involved in his career in various different ways. And I think they do a pretty good job, especially in WCW later on, of sort of maintaining that through line, if not directly giving you a history lesson, just spelling out that, hey, DDP and Kurt Hennig, they have major history going back to the 80s. It certainly will see that in his early WCW run as well. I do love the name Norma Jean's as the nightclub. I don't know why. And the pink Cadillac, of course. Even if you don't know that that's like a DDP thing, you know that from WrestleMania 6. So it's just sort of interesting the way that he had this. I don't know. I wouldn't say like left a footprint on the industry early on, but in these small ways, like more of him than you think you probably do.
Yes. Yeah, he was he was one of those guys who started off small, it seems like, and just started getting himself over by just, hard work. He then moves on to Florida Championship Wrestling in 1989. He worked as a color commentator, and it was soon renamed Professional Wrestling Federation, PWF. He worked alongside Gordon Solie, one of the all-time greatest wrestling commentators of all time, and before he debuted as a professional wrestler himself. His first pro match occurred in May of 1989 against Dick Slater. Then in 1990, he received a tryout with the WWF as an announcer, but he wasn't offered a job. However, at WrestleMania 6, as you mentioned, he drove Rhythm and Blues, Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine to the ring in his pink Cadillac. At this time, he was virtually unknown in the World Wrestling Federation. When FCW went out of business, he was still involved in the club business until Dusty Rhodes returned to WCW, and he started booking and brought Page in on a small contract early in '91. So do you remember the WrestleMania 6 appearance?
I mean, I didn't see it live when it happened, but when I did actually watch WrestleMania 6, and I have no idea first time I saw WrestleMania 6, that one of those things I've forgotten. There we go. I mean, I remember that car and thinking that was like a really cool entrance for, I mean, sort of a shit tag team.
A crappy tag team. You can say it, Tim. It's okay.
It's a pretty shit team here that they're going all out for. It feels like, but hey, it's the glitz and the spectacle of WrestleMania. It's all good. I'm really fascinated by this Florida Championship Wrestling stint. I won't even call it a run, really. It's another one of those similar to AWA, kind of a fly-by-night sort of thing, it sounds like, with him. Yep. Obviously, he's running his nightclub in Florida. You got Florida Championship Wrestling. He obviously has some interest in professional wrestling, like got like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, maybe doesn't want to wrestle, but is interested enough in the business as like a side hustle that he thinks he can make some money, at least as a manager. And we see in SCW as a commentator working with, of all people, Gordon Soley. And
not a pair, you would think.
No, like I you can see DDP, especially early DDP, kind of that jaw-jacking, loudmouth Jersey guy that he was, sort of this larger-than-life personality. That can work as a color man, right? But Gordon Soley, just the straight man to end straight man, with his play-by-play. And I know people like dog on Gordon Soley, and it feels like you have to be above a certain age to really like Gordon Soley's commentary, but I don't know. I find him kind of endearing. And from what little I have heard of this combination, it is about as awkward as you would probably think. It's just one of those. I mean, you talk about some of the commentary teams that just did not click, like JR and Jesse in WCW, which is just oil and water. Two great commentators on their own, put them together, and it's just like you cannot mix the two. And DDP and Gordon Soley calling matches for Florida Championship Wrestling is I just wish more of this stuff was out there. Like, why is there not more FCW on the network? Because they did some wild shit. And this is just one of those, it's like a cherry on top, really. I want to see more of this, more FCW in general, but especially like from this period where Paige would have been there calling matches.
Well, I don't think it was the FCW that we may associate FCW with, because that went on to become NXT.
No, absolutely not. This is where Dusty Rhodes did his work after leaving Crockett / WCW. Yeah, this was territory Florida Championship Wrestling.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Not developmental FCW.
No. That's definitely. And I wish they didn't call it that, to be honest with you, because it is a little bit confusing. Yeah, this is where Kevin Sullivan did some of his most insane stuff.
And we know you love. You talk about it on your WCW show. You guys love Kevin Sullivan.
Yep. Especially he has an insane feud with Dusty Rhodes and FCW. I would implore people to look that up on YouTube to get an idea of just what this territory was like. Oh. It's sort of Florida in a nutshell, right?
That's a very 2020 thing to say. It's Florida.
Yeah.
All right. So he comes to WCW, World Championship Wrestling 91, as the manager of the Fabulous Freebirds. At that time was Jimmy Garvin and Michael Hayes. He then he managed them to a shot at the NWA World Tag Championships, where they defeated Doom, which Reed and Ron Simmons. Before that match took place, he unveiled the stable's new road manager, Big Daddy Dink, formerly known as Oliver Humperdinck, who interfered in the match. During this match, he also introduced the Diamond Dolls. He then added Scott Hall to the stable under the name of the Diamond Stud. He then worked as a color commentator in WCW with Eric Bischoff. So what do you think of this initial entry with for DDP? I honestly don't remember the Big Daddy Dink thing, because I think it was very quick. But the Freebirds beating Doom, if to the uninformed would think, what the hell, how did that happen? Especially this version of the Freebirds.
The shittiest version of who I will say has always been a shitty team. Like I say this as a Southern person. I always hated the Freebirds. Like that may be
there are a lot of sizzle, not as much steak as you'd like to see.
Like it may be a generational thing, but I just think they suck so much. But I guess it's sort of appropriate that DDP comes in as their manager because his managerial persona and his look is basically great value Michael Hayes. And that is saying something, I realize. Because 1991 Michael Hayes is, that's pretty rough. President of the Smell Club, Michael Hayes, right? So DDP is going to come in and manage these fools, and it's now just Hayes and Jimmy Garvin, and it's just like, ooh, this is during a period in WCW where they're trying out a lot of characters. I believe he debuts, correct me if I'm wrong, on Super Brawl 1, first Super Brawl, which also had a pretty important debut, that being Oz, I believe. Kevin Nash's Oz coming out. I don't know if it's the same show, but you also had, in the same period, like the original iteration of Johnny B. Bad, who is,
yeah.
He's like a space alien. That initial Johnny B. Bad, like, I don't know why they thought that would appeal to people. I know what they were going for, but it's like, why do people want to see Little Richard as a wrestler? And why is this like overly tanned white man doing a Little Richard cosplay? It's very uncomfortable. So you've got all that, and you've got Big Josh, right, with his dancing bears. This is where you hear about all this stuff, like they're going to turn Ric Flair into Spartacus or whatever and cut his hair and give him an earring, I think. Who was the team that could not be pinned? Because they were hunchbacks or whatever, right? So just all this, the goddamn Candyman, like all this early 90s dreck in WCW, they're just throwing out there, doing the cartoonish, trying to do what the WWF has done much more effectively in putting characters first, but they're just not good at it. And all of these characters are huge misses. So DDP is in there with that, and he's sort of like the most normal of all of this nonsense, the most normal character and personality in the sea of just absolute nonsense. It feels like in early 90s WCW. So yeah, he's going to manage the Freebirds, and it's a bad tag team that's going to have bad matches with Doom, and you just wish they would go away.
So the event actually was Wrestle War 91.
Okay. Still early.
You were close. You're way closer than I ever would have been. So, it was quite the card. Let me read the card quickly. Eddie Guerrero and Ultraman defeated Huiko and Rudy Boy. Ricky Morton, Tommy Rich, and Junkyard Dog defeated Big Cat and the State Patrol. That was the World Six-Man Tag Championship.
State Patrol. Here we go. Yes.
Which was James Earl Wright and Buddy Lee Parker. Bobby Eaton defeated Brad Armstrong. Itsuki Yamakaze and Mami Kitamura defeated Miki Honda and Miss A. Dustin Rose defeated Buddy Landau. The Young Pistols defeated the Royal Family. That was Jack Morgan and Jack Victory and Rip Morgan. Terry Taylor with Alexandria York defeated the Z-Man.
York Foundation, yeah.
Yes. Big Van Vader versus Stan Hansen ended in a double DQ. Lex Luger defeated Dan Spivey, defended his United States Heavyweight Championship. You had the Freebirds beat Doom, and then you had the Four Horsemen, which was Wyndham, Flair, Vicious, and Zbyszko, with Arn Anderson defeated Pillman, the Steiner Brothers, and Sting in a War Games match.
Yes, that War Games, pretty good. I controversially have it higher than another favorite War Games, but that's probably for a different podcast.
Yes, we will pimp that project later on in the show. So
that was his debut, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the Freebirds, and then at that Super Brawl, that's where we get Oz and Big Josh and
yes,
and Johnny B. Bad, and so on and so forth.
So there were rumors circulating backstage that WCW wanted to take the Diamond Stud away from him. As his manager, he decided to take the advice of Magnum TA and began to wrestle himself. He headed to the power plant where Buddy Lee Parker, the Assassin, and Dusty Rhodes trained him, a 35-year-old rookie. Tim,
Jesus,
that's just insane.
Yeah. This is 1991. He is 35 years old. So we are years away from anyone knowing or caring about Diamond Dallas Page, and he's 35 years old.
Yep. He debuted as a wrestler in a tag match later that year. With the Diamond Stud, he faced Kevin Sullivan and his partner. He was relegated to the jobber list. He made his wrestling pay-per-view at Starrcade 91, teaming with Mike Graham in a losing effort to Jushin Thunder Liger and Bill Kazmaier. It's funny, as I'm doing the research, I remember that. That was the Lethal Lottery. The battle
yes, the urethral lottery. Yes, that gives you battle bowel movements. Very, very atrocious pay-per-view. I know that some people somehow defend it, and it's really quite mind-boggling. Terrible gimmick that engulfs an entire pay-per-view. Ugh.
At the time, I thought it was fun, but becoming a more educated wrestling fan and looking back and watching it, it's not a good show at all.
It's nigh unwatchable for me, because there is some intrigue in terms of, okay, how are these teams going to shake out, but it's like random or very low stakes matches with no heat, and it's just like the worst combination of wrestling of not just bad but boring and bad. So
it's like somebody was bored playing a video game and decided to put these teams together.
Pretty much. Throw them in the randomizer.
Yeah. So in regards to this period of time, though, he had said that Bischoff gave him the job as he was a good example of work ethic, passion, and somebody that cares about the business. When he wasn't working, he went down to the power plant and worked on his craft. And then you have to, he kept adapting and kept going back. This is a guy that worked his ass off basically to become what he was.
And this is where I think people want to get on his case and say, well, he just kissed the right asses. And yeah, he probably did. Going back to FCW with Dusty Rhodes, forming a relationship there, which is going to serve him well in WCW, given some of the political power that Dusty commands. Of course, Bischoff, too. I wonder if he probably talked about this in his book, which I have read around the time when it came back, his autobiography, Positively Page. Longtime friendship with Eric Bischoff as well, who himself was in the AWA. So I'm trying to remember if they met there or not. But be that as it may, he's networking, right? So he's not just working hard, but he's working smart at the same time. He's getting to know people who are influential or will be in pretty influential positions. And you can call it brown nosing all day long, but I don't know. Show me any person, show me any industry who's been successful without, knowing the right people. It may be sleazy, it may not be ideal, but that's everywhere. That is far from unique to wrestling.
Yeah, people, look, there are people that brown nose, but there are also people that work hard and the powers that be take a shine to them, because of the right reasons, not because they sat there and gave them the answers they wanted to hear or told them they worked, and that the case could be made for Page. We weren't there, we don't know exactly what was going on backstage, but the fact of the matter was that he was 35, and that Yeah, he got a shot. Maybe if he got a shot because he was friends with Bischoff, big deal. He proved himself, in the wrestling, in the storytelling, in the character work, promos, everything. He wasn't like a guy that didn't deserve to be on TV, didn't deserve to be in the matches he ended up being in. No, he worked his way there. And yes, it takes networking. It takes being friends with the right people sometimes to happen. There have been plenty of people that have come through many businesses that just, would have been successes had they made the right connections. And Paige just happened to did it right,
And it's far from like an Eric Watts nepotism situation where it's truly just because of his relationship with the person in charge, he's getting opportunities. Like Eric Watts absolutely sucked, and it for a long time. And DDP, yeah, he sucked at first, but he put in the work and he did improve, and he did make sure people took notice of the fact that he was putting in that work. And dedicated to improving his craft. So he did have some talent to back it up. It took him a minute to get there, but he kept at it. And, turns out that he was a pretty sound investment. It just took a little while to pay off.
I would compare him to Trish Stratus.
Okay.
Because Trish comes in beautiful, hot, great body, fitness model. On the microphone, start off as a valet.
As a valet manager, yep.
Yeah, and worked her ass off probably to become one of the greatest women wrestlers WWE has ever seen.
Worked harder than she probably had to, let's face it. Like she came from the, like, was she like a sports model or something?
Yeah, she was a fitness model.
Fitness model, there we go. And for whatever reason decided, hey, if I'm gonna be wrestling and having matches, then I want them to be halfway decent. So I'm gonna train. I'm gonna get good at this, and she sure shit did.
Yeah. So the same could be said for DDP, but we're not doing Evolution Trish Stratus. Let's get back to talking about.
I like that parallel. That's an interesting analogy. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I'm a big Trish fan. So
yeah.
Yeah,
maybe I'll do a string of female episodes since I haven't done a female yet, and we'll get her on and get you back for her. All right. So anyway, he continues wrestling and brings other wrestlers into his stable. It was called the Diamond Mine now, and he brought Sky Flamingo, better known as Raven, and Vinny Vegas, aka Kevin Nash, one of his thousands of gimmicks in WCW.
Yes, post Oz, pre Kevin Nash. Yes.
Yeah, pre Diesel.
Diesel, pre-NWO.
Yeah. Vinny Vegas, well, at up to that moment, Vinny Vegas was the best thing he had.
I know. That's saying something.
I remember when they falsely said that he was a southpaw, that ridiculous arm wrestling thing with Jesse Ventura. Yeah. Yep. So the relationships between the three of them were using angles over the following months. He, was in the corner of Sky Flamingo at Clash of Champions 9 in 92 when Flamingo bought Johnny B. Bad in a worked boxing match. He won this match with help from DDP with his glove filled with water.
Yes, great little gimmick. I just want to say, because I don't know where else it would fit, but I feel like there's a window, and work with me here a little bit. In the absence of the Dangerous Alliance as a stable, which is obviously a very good, fondly remembered, main event to your WCW stable.
Probably second only to the Horsemen in terms of how people fondly remember them.
Yeah, probably fair to say. In the absence of doing that, I feel like there's a window where you could have the Diamond Mine of Diamond Dallas Page, now wrestling, Vinny Vegas, Diamond Stud, before he leaves for WWF, and I guess Johnny Flamingo, maybe throw somebody else in there, I don't know. Have them as a team against Cactus Jack and Johnny B. Bad and Heavy Metal Van Hammer.
Oh, God.
Yeah, who else really sucked? Was Max Payne around yet? Probably not, but guys like this, and just a shitty mid card War Games, if we don't get one of the best war games ever in 1992 at that Wrestle War, why don't we have like one of the worst and just go all out with shitty mid-card Mania war games?
That would have been something.
You're right.
Yes. So
Stud on the
table. Yeah. Stud and Flamingo then leave the stable. He then teams up with Vinny Vegas, and they become a tag team known as the Vegas Connection. However, the team was disbanded shortly after when he suffered a torn rotator cuff in a match against Tex Slazenger and Shanghai Pierce toward the end of '92, and was later fired when Kevin Nash left WCW for the WWF.
Yeah, early '93, DDP is gone from WCW for quite some time, for like the better part of a year, really, with that injury that he is rehabbing, but also, working on his character and his persona and presumably his wrestling skills as well.
Yes. So then, up to this point, there's nothing real memorable for us to talk about in terms of his ring gear, his music, his signature matches and feuds. It's basically he was just another guy. He was a good manager, okay wrestler, but nothing of note. Like he was like in a time when we're prior to the Monday Night Wars, before WCW really started to fire on all cylinders and start attracting, start guys jumping over from WWF. This is kind of like those middling years, I guess, early WCW, where there was good wrestling and there was some hokiness going on, and he was part of a lot of the hokiness, I guess you might want to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's a tag guy when you needed a just jobber tag team back then, and worked well enough, in that role. I think probably the most memorable of anything from early 90s first run WCW DDP would have been that Scotty Flamingo stuff with
Johnny B. Bad.
The worked boxing match with Johnny B. Bad. I mean, it's silly, but you do sort of remember it, if you remember any of this. And, I mean, there is something there, just in the sense that this is going to come back around, much like other guys and DDP's early interactions. Johnny B. Bad, somebody he's going to work with more directly once he returns. So there is that little bit of history there.
Yeah. So then he, he's off for the year or so, and he was working on his character. He seeks out Jake Roberts, who advised him on the psychological aspects of the business. After he heals, he returns to WCW in 1994 with his wife Kimberly as the Diamond Doll and an on-screen bodyguard, Max Muscle. I honestly do not remember Max Muscle at all.
Yeah. He's one of those steroid guys. He's like a body guy. And he really sucks as a bodyguard. It's kind of his whole deal. But this is an interesting transition that DDP has made, because this is, and Eric Bischoff has talked about this. I think he talked about it in the induction speech that he gave for DDP when he went to the Hall of Fame. How he's just like grabbing every gimmick he possibly can. He's got the gaudy jewelry now. He's got the hot valet. He's got the bodyguard. He's got the cigar. He's just throwing everything out there, hoping it will connect with people, because he knows that he needs to stand out in the crowd. If his work is still not really there yet in ring, but he does have some support behind the scenes. And now he needs the gimmick, he needs the character, so he's just kind of trying out everything, and that's part of what Max Muscle is here. I do think that people tend to overlook Kimberly's role in all this. I definitely think she helped him get over, in the way that Chyna really contributed to Triple H's rise, and maybe doesn't get the credit that she deserves. Kimberly's, she's never been much much of a talker, not like a personality, on her own or, even paired with DDP, but just, as that Diamond Doll character,
She
adding
was his
to,
Elizabeth, basically.
yeah, adding to his repertoire as his like heel Elizabeth in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It did give him a little bit of an edge, I think, over other guys.
So he had held arm wrestling challenges to win Kimberly, but they were open to anybody, but Max had always helped him win or arm wrestle for him. He was also involved in an angle where he was said to have supposedly amassed a sum of $13 million through victories in arm wrestling competitions, a fortune that he would later lose. He also had a long feud with Dave Sullivan because Sullivan gave Kimberly gifts, which was largely because he was defeated by Sullivan in on one of the arm wrestling contests, which earned him a date with Kimberly. At Fall Brawl that year, he won his first championship when he defeated the Renegade for the WCW World Television Championship. In the build-up for his first title defense at Halloween Havoc, there was dissension between him and Kimberly. Johnny B. Bad defeated him for the TV title again and at that event, and then again at World War III, winning Kimberly's freedom from DDP at Uncensored in March 24th, 1996. The Booty Man, with Kimberly as the Booty Babe, defeated Diamond Dallas Page in a loser leaves town match. So what do you think of this brief run of his with the TV title?
Okay, so we blew through a lot of history there, this kind of mid-90s stretch of DDP. I do want to throw out a fun fact, as I do on any time I talk about DDP. His feud with Dave, sometimes known as Evad Sullivan, involving Kimberly, was quite humorous to me because Dave wins this date with Kimberly, right? Mm-hmm. And we see their date documented and play out on WCW Saturday Night here in, I guess, 1995. And one of the things they do is they go to a movie, and Dave takes Kimberly to see, of all films, The Lion King. That's this is, I don't know why, this is what I remember from this feud with Dave Sullivan. So yeah, this is what's happening. We have an extended feud with Dave Sullivan. We're doing arm wrestling competitions. We're now doing an angle where he's rich but loses the money. At first, this money comes into his possession through the arm wrestling circuit. We know what large purses that is known for. So
just watch Over the Top. Come on.
Oh yeah, so you could so quickly amass $13 million. I mean, it's chump change when you think about it, really. So this happens, and then they do a deal where Kimberly wins the money back, or was it the same 13 million? I don't remember, but she apparently wins a lot of money in bingo. And he takes half of that, but throughout his feud with Johnny B. Bad, he loses his TV title, which I'll talk about. He loses his woman, the Diamond Doll, and he loses his half of the money. So he basically loses everything in the course of this feud with Johnny B. Bad, his longtime nemesis, dating back to, 1992. And that's quite unfortunate because he'd never be able to avenge this series of losses since, Johnny B. Bad just told WCW to go pound sand, left, went to the WWF. That was the end of it. So they might have booked that differently had they known his contract was not locked up. Anyway, wins the TV title from Renegade in the fall of 95, I guess. Fall Brawl. So this is where we're now using the diamond cutter, okay? And this is something that really haunts me. It bothers me because to this day, I don't know the first time DDP used the diamond cutter. I don't know what match he debuts this in, but I know it's around, as early as 95. Maybe earlier than that. I kind of think so, but 95 is when it sort of starts catching on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not exactly the diamond cutter as we would come to know it. It doesn't have as much snap. He's not really hitting it out of different positions. It's sort of more like a slightly elevated bulldog.
Yes.
But it is the diamond cutter. And he wins that World Television Championship. Doesn't have much of a run because he just immediately drops that to Johnny B. Bad. But they do have a somewhat memorable match at Halloween Havoc for the title. And basically, this was during a time period where Johnny B. Bad was challenging for the U.S. Championship, but DDP kind of cost him that opportunity. Again, another memorable Saturday night angle where apparently DDP sabotages Bad's car. He gives him 4 flat tires. I guess he slits his. Do you remember any of this? Like somebody...
I remember, like, it's bits and pieces of it. It's not that fresh. It's been a long time since I've seen any of this stuff, but I was watching at the time.
Someone other than myself and Jennifer Smith remembers this. Because Johnny gives a very, very memorable backstage interview on WCW Saturday Night. He's been late for his match, his scheduled challenge for the U.S. Championship, which was, I believe, held by Sting at the time. So because of his flat tire situation, misses his match, misses his chance to win the U.S. title, and DDP or Max Muscle basically they give themselves away by saying that, you know, you had 4 flat tires, couldn't make it to the arena, and Bad fires back, I never said anything about 4 flat tires, and things explode from there. So yeah, we're fighting over missed title shots and flat tires, and ultimately this does give Johnny B. Bad a shot at the World Television Championship. So I guess it worked out okay for him in the end, since he does win that and successfully defend it. Then wins Kimberly, which a little bit problematic, but it's what you do in the 90s, I guess. And then, again, wins the Fortune. So quite the stretch here. I mean,
yeah.
94, 95, this is where DDP is becoming more of like, okay, people who watch WCW know who this guy is. Mm-hmm. He's just sort of a mid-card heel, solid hand. He's nobody's favorite in the world, but you go into a show, you're going to see a DDP match, probably against Johnny B. Bad.
Yeah.
But it's going to be like a solid enough opener or, middle of the show type of match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he then, after the loser leave town thing happens, he returns on May 18th, 1996, on episode of WCW Saturday Night. He defeats Billy Kidman, acting in a tweener role. Mm-hmm. He then participates in the Lord of the Ring tournament, which was the Battle Bowl at Slamboree that year. Oh. He was victorious when he defeated the Barbarian with 2 diamond cutters. Yep. The winner would be the number 1 contender for the world title, which at that time was held by the Giant, a.k.a. the Big Show. However, he never received a title shot that he earned. He was feuding with Eddie Guerrero when the NWO was formed. Since National were both former partners of Page, they assisted him in his matches in the tournament being held for the vacant U.S. Heavyweight Championship title, believing their assistance was not appreciated. However, they attacked him during the tournament finals, therefore handing the belt to Guerrero. After demonstrating the benefits of the NWO, they asked him to join. He responded by giving them diamond cutters on January 25th, 1997 at Sold Out, and started.
This is not accurate.
With a feud with the NWO. Oh, really?
This is not accurate.
No?
No. I mean, it's sort of accurate, but that is not precisely what happened. So, all right, 96, we're getting the diamond cutter over now, right? He's realizing he's got the hot move. And even though he's a heel, people are really responding to this. And he wins that Battle Bowl, the last Battle Bowl. and he's the Lord of the Ring. He has the Battle Bowl ring, literally the ring that all winners are entitled to, I guess. He's going around. He's using that as a foreign object, winning matches. He's got the title opportunity. this is one of those things that gets steamrolled by the formation of the NWO. And this is also during a time period which is not mentioned, but is somewhat important to his character, that there is a mysterious benefactor. Remember any of this stuff? Because after he lost everything, down and out, lost his entire life to Johnny B. Bad, basically. He's gone from the penthouse to the outhouse, baby. And he's trying to make a comeback. He's literally selling off his ring gear. So you'd see like episodes of WCW Saturday Night where Disco Inferno is wrestling in DDP's old boots or something, because he's like trying to just hawk everything he owns just to stay afloat. Then he gets the benefactor, goes on this, not so much a win streak, but sees some success, and have this question in the back of everyone's mind: who is the mysterious benefactor? And when is Page going to get his title shot? Well, these things never happen because the NWO gets started and they just steamroll a lot of that mid-card storyline stuff that's out there.
They said it was supposed to be Kimberly, right? Although that didn't happen.
I heard that maybe DiBiase,
okay,
who wasn't actually there yet, but they either knew he was coming in or they were trying to get him. And I mean, DiBiase does get involved in the NWO,
yes,
when he comes to WCW. And so they're teasing this idea that DDP is going to join the NWO, which would have made a lot of sense given his history with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. And if DiBiase is a mysterious benefactor, bang, bang, boom, there you go. But they don't do that. They move him into this feud with Eddie Guerrero, which is actually that's where he does some of his earliest best work, DDP. I mean, working with somebody like Eddie, of course, is going to bring out the best in you. But they have a pretty decent, solid series of matches, I thought. And that leads to the U.S. title tournament. We think that the Outsiders are going to hand it to DDP. They do not. They cost him that championship. So Eddie wins the vacant title at Starrcade 96.
Yep.
This is when we go into 97 and he starts properly feuding now with the NWO. And I remember there was a memorable interview he has with Mean Gene on a Nitro, who's asking him, what's your relationship with the Outsiders? Are you going to join the NWO? And he gives one of those very non-committal sort of responses, but it's sounding more and more like, he's not in their back pocket after all. They're very much teasing this face turn. And this face turn actually happens at the Nitro in 97 in January, I believe at the Superdome. I want to say our friend Andrew Reich was there in person. If I remember correctly. He basically gets the invitation from Kevin Nash and Scott Hall to join the NWO. Hey, we were just hazing you basically, but we do want you in. We love you, Dally. Gives him the shirt, puts on the shirt, looks like he's going to join, shakes Scott Hall's hand, pulls him in, boom, diamond cutter, and throws Nash out of the ring, escapes through the crowd. So this is where the People's Champion Diamond Dallas Page has arrived and now has made that full character turn. That was on a Nitro at Sold Out, which was also in January, the pay-per-view. Yeah. They kind of almost redo this angle, but without the Outsiders. He has a match with Scott Norton.
Yes.
And once again, they're inviting him to join the NWO. I guess they've forgotten that he completely humiliated them on Nitro. But they're just basically redoing the angle for some reason. And once again, Page, thumbs his nose at them, hits Norton with the diamond cutter, but does not pin him because all the NWO spills out, chases him once again out into the crowd. And
it seems like mostly B team. I'm reading it right now. It's Bagwell, Big Bubba Rogers, Michael Wall Street, Vincent.
Yeah, so they run the B team out there on the pay-per-view for some reason. But this sort of established a trend of DDP getting over on the NWO, which no babyface in WCW had really done up to that point. So, of all people, this kind of lame mid-card heel throughout the 90s who had a hot finishing move turns face and gets over on these guys night after night. And it's like, holy shit. Of all people, why am I now a sudden mark for Diamond Dallas Page? Who is Diamond Dallas Page? Like, where's Lex Luger? Where's Sting? The Giant is at this point in the NWO, but in the process of leaving. So they're building up that face opposition to the New World Order. But DDP was really front and center of that. Sting's not wrestling. Luger is very over in his own right, but I tell you, it's really, you watch those 97 Nitros, it's like neck and neck, DDP and Luger, in terms of the over baby faces in that war against NWO.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then he starts to feud with one of the newest recruits, the Macho Man Randy Savage. And he, of course, he's one of the many baby faces that ends up, beaten in the ring and with the NWO spray paint on his back. He then, they did a work shoot by revealing to the world that Paige and Kimberly were in fact married. That was broken by, Savage and Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And then he and Savage battle in a match where Paige emerged victorious, but the feud keeps on going to the Great American Bash, where there was an anything go lights out match. The match ended with Savage defeating Paige with help from then tag team champion Scott Hall. Then later on at the Bash at the Beach, Scott Hall and Randy Savage defeated DDP and Kurt Hennig. Kurt Hennig, who Diamond Dallas Page has recruited personally to join WCW and team with him, turned on him during the match. So then he goes on to face Hennig at Road Wild. So what do you think of this little stretch of time with Page basically just taking on the NWO with anybody he can?
Oh, man. So if that face turn is what put him on the map, I would say this Randy Savage feud is what cemented his legacy ultimately. Mm-hmm. Because this is stuff that everybody remembers, whether they particularly liked Diamond Dallas Page or not. It was a big, big deal when he went over Randy Savage at that Spring Stampede. So that was built off of a pretty hot segment on Uncensored, where, as you described, basically they do this semi-work shoot thing where Savage is revealing that Kimberly did Playboy and that she and DDP are actually married because, in kayfabe terms, they had been split apart. She was the Diamond Doll, but really they are married, happily married. She did Playboy and he does the giant centerfold that drops from he has it spray painted with the black spray paint over the most revealing
the naughty bits.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of I don't know, I wouldn't call it truly a work shoot angle, because it's not like they're really trying to hide the fact that these two are married, and they're not going to talk about that she did Playboy just because they don't do that stuff back then. So that's what kind of gets them off and running. But yeah, at Uncensored, they bring Kimberly out, and it's they're hinting at that she's been at least physically assaulted backstage. She's been spray painted, and it's a really uncomfortable segment to go back and watch today. I don't know how people necessarily responded at the time. I was not watching wrestling live as it happened this early in 97 again yet. I had not come back just quite yet. But yeah, go back and watch that Uncensored. This just confrontation between Savage and it's not even a confrontation. Savage comes out and basically attacks Paige from behind, and that's when they bring out Kimberly. And yeah, it's one of those like would not play well today sorts of angles. But that's what gets them going. They have the match at Stampede. DDP goes over clean, and this is Savage giving his vote of confidence and Diamond Dallas Page saying, what do you want to do, Randy? He has a degree of stroke. If you don't want to lose to DDP, he's not going to. He's Randy Savage. He says, think I want to take the diamond cutter. And sure enough, takes that diamond cutter. 1, 2, 3. I will say that, and I kind of have to say this, I feel like watching it back, it's not as, like, they don't put Page over as strong as they could have. Because as soon as he gets the 3 count, like, all the NWO spills out, runs in, beats his ass. Like, they almost try to walk that win back right away. Like, they do everything to undermine it the night that it happens. And it's just one of those, like, go on, you couldn't give him the victory and just have him escape through the crowd like he's done several times already. Just let him have this one night. If you want to, beat his ass on Nitro the next night, fine, but give him one night at least. And they don't really do that. So, yeah, he gets the clean win, which, I mean, it does say a lot in the NWO era of WCW, but I feel like they could have made a stronger statement at the end of the day, watching this back. But it is what it is. They go on. They have the feud. They have a rematch at Great American Bash, a lights out match, it's called. And that's pretty solid, too. Savage goes over there with help from Scott Hall. So he doesn't get a clean win. It's not like they totally, 50-50 it or anything. Keep the feud going. And, oh, man, it's around this time, too. I guess, was it before Great American Bash match? It probably was. Where Savage has a Nitro match against La Parka. Remember this?
Yeah, this is after a Fall Brawl. It was always July 7th. Sorry. So whoever wrote this is totally out of order.
Yeah. I'm like, I know that this is in the timeline. So
yeah, no, it was this July 7th Monday Nitro. Yeah.
Okay, so Great American Bash would have been in June. So wow, the La Parka match then on Nitro is right after this, and it's one of those things where WCW would have such random pairings on these Nitro matches, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't anything out of the ordinary necessarily that Randy Savage is wrestling La Parka. You figure, it's going to be a squash match for Savage. They'll do some kind of angle advancement, but nobody really blinked an eye at the idea of La Parka out there wrestling Savage.
Well, because he's also one of the taller or bigger luchadors.
And he's one of the bigger luchadors. Yeah. So when Savage goes up for that elbow, La Parka blocks it. You're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? How is La Parka getting over on Randy Savage? Gives him a fucking diamond cutter and pins him, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. One of the great swerves in wrestling.
Yes, I remember
Unmasked. That. Yeah, Unmasked, and it's DDP in this fucking skeleton get up. You love to see it. So that's one of my all-time DDP moments for certain. But yeah, brings us into Bash at the Beach. We have now Hennig debut. So this makes a lot of sense now. Former tag team partner of DDP, Kurt Hennig, or not tag team partner, former
running buddy, I guess you might want to say.
Yeah. So he managed Hennig in AWA. Hennig comes in WCW finally after much fanfare. Pair these two up, and so it's gonna be a hot face tag team. Nope, Kurt Hennig gonna be Kurt Hennig. Turns on Page in the match, and this is before Hennig even properly joins NWO.
Yeah.
But that's going to get them going in a little mini feud at Road Wild. Not much of a match, honestly. That could have been better. but it makes sense just to pay off, the idea of Hennig turning on Page, the last pay-per-view. Then we're in sort of a holding pattern, right? So DDP is still feuding with Savage, but they're not having all their matches on consecutive pay-per-views. I kind of like feuds that work that way. Mm-hmm. I like when you do a couple back-to-back matches, maybe cool it down, heat it back up. I like those kind of feuds. And we go into Fall Brawl, another tag match. DDP and Luger, much more of a solid hand now than Curt Hennig's going to be, going up against Savage and Scott Hall. So it's one of those, like, once again, Hall is a guy that DDP has been associated with in the past, used to manage. Hall helped Savage out in the second pay-per-view match that they had. Mm-hmm. So, do a tag match here. And
it was a no DQ match, too.
Right. And it's kind of sort of okay. Mm-hmm. We are going to go into Halloween Havoc in 97 to finally blow off this feud, this almost year-long feud between DDP and Randy Savage, a sudden death match, which I think, I don't know how to call it. Well, it might be the best singles match of their feud, but with like the worst finish. Like I really think that at the end of the day, like if you wanted DDP to come out of this and be better for the feud, then you got to have him win the rubber match. And he doesn't. Once again, he gets screwed over. Hogan in a Sting mask comes in with a baseball bat. Yeah. And we're already now establishing very injury prone now Diamond Dallas Page with the taped ribs, and I think they were selling it as a kidney injury at this point. So he's constantly having his midsection injured and having the tape or some kind of support. And that was a sudden death match, which is basically just a last man standing match, in the weird way that WCW would do them. But I kind of dig that match for what it is up until the finish. But they do like lead into, from that we get a match with Page and Hogan on Nitro, which that's a big fucking deal, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Especially when you look at Hollywood Hogan's 1997 in WCW. Like, he is barely wrestling at all in 97. I don't know what it was, but even by like a Hogan wrestling schedule, he is barely working any matches. And for one of those to be a singles match with DDP on a Nitro, pretty big deal. Indecisive finish, of course, but Page gets some shine. And Hogan seemed to be a fan of the Diamond Cutter because he kind of marks out using the Diamond Cutter on DDP, which is one of those like early finisher stealing reversal spots that are sort of more popular today. You didn't see a whole lot of that back in 97. But that was, pretty big. Another just big vote of confidence in DDP from one of the top guys. First Savage, well, really going back to Hall and Nash, Savage, and now Hogan. Mm-hmm. So major stuff here in late 97 now.
Yeah. And ending the year, he wins the U.S. heavyweight title from Curt Hennig.
Yeah.
And then in 98 at Uncensored, he defended the title in the Triple Threat Falls Count Anywhere match against Chris Benoit and Raven, putting Raven through a table with a diamond cutter, and he retains the belt, but then he later loses it to Raven at Spring Stampede. Later in the year, he tags with Karl Malone against Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman at the Bash at the Beach, losing due to interference. He then tags with late night talk show host Jay Leno at Road Wild, where they defeat Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. So
what are we doing?
I know, what are we doing? So this is a short period of time, but it's quite a stretch to put him with the celebrities. As bad as those matches were, it just shows that this is a guy that can carry it from the face side at least.
Honestly,
go ahead.
I feel like you can take the pulse of WCW as a company, as a promotion, against like what's going on with DDP.
Yes.
I don't know how to phrase it. Like, that's maybe not the most articulate phrasing, but like just sort of the way that his career ebbs and flows, so too goes WCW. Like, early 90s, not much happening, right? 95, it really starts to heat up. Really take it back to 94 through 95. 96, like a good year, like a good solid year for DDP and company alike. 97, red hot, and 98, just peak of their powers, and then they start to sort of decline after that. That's so weird to me. But okay, so this late 97 into 98 time frame in these feuds with Hennig and Benoit and Raven, this is what like locked me back in as a wrestling fan, Andy. I just remember like getting back into wrestling during this time period and seeing DDP for the first time. I guess it would have been on Starrcade 97.
Mm-hmm.
And like, the music, you can't mess with the Smells Like Teen Spirit knockoff theme that he has at this
Self High Five.
Yeah, so that's going to get you going right away.
Mm-hmm.
Before you even see, who's coming out to this. He's got the look. I mean, yeah, it's haggard ass Diamond Dallas Page, sure, but all the leather and the taped ribs, and at this point he's probably rocking the denim. So he's very much like that working man's champion, people's champion. And of course he's got the hot finish. The diamond cutter is like the coolest move I have ever seen. So I'm like, oh shit, like I'm all in on this guy now. And I'd already started to get into Chris Benoit through his feud with Raven and the Flock. I think that's some very effective mid-card heel work that WCW had going on with that Flock stable. So when you got a little bit sick of all the NWO shenanigans, you still had the Flock right there. And I really love to hate those guys. And that feud between Benoit and Raven was like hot shit. So DDP got involved in that by offering Benoit a shot at his U.S. championship that he had won from Hennig at Starrcade in an okay match. But, Benoit is sort of stuck in this feud with Raven, and the Flock all run in. They screw up the match. It doesn't happen. Ultimately, we do get that match, that singles match between DDP and Benoit at Super Brawl 98. Kind of not as good as you'd want it to be, I feel like, but it's all right. But yeah, that just sucks DDP into this feud that Benoit has going on with Raven and the Flock, and ultimately he kind of snakes that feud from Chris Benoit. They transition Benoit out of that. He goes on to do the Best of 7 series with Booker T, so things kind of still work out okay for him. And man, DDP in this blood feud with Raven now, had that triple threat, which is a really fun match and uncensored. It's not like great, but it's just a fun watch. Spring Stampede singles match with Raven. That's where he loses the U.S. title. Gets DDT'd on a kitchen sink. Pretty cool. Raven the next night immediately drops the title to Goldberg. So that gives Goldberg his first title. So weird little bit of trivia how DDP was sort of a part of that, and giving Raven that extremely transitional run as champion for one night. But they pay off their feud at Slamboree. It's in a cage match, and that's kind of that's like one of those personal favorites that I would not say is a great match or anything, but I could throw on and watch it anytime. And that's kind of the story of all their matches. But man, this was like, if you asked me why I was a wrestling fan in 1998, I'd be like, because of all this right here,
Yeah.
DDP and the Flock and Benoit, and all this shit that's going on. Like, that's what did it for me. If that all wasn't there, I don't know that I would have stayed on the hook. You know, that's what kept me. That, like, for as much as the Sting Hogan main event scene was what got your interest, got you on the hook as a casual fan, this is what kept me hanging in there. And yeah, it's just one thing led to another, and somehow I'm still watching wrestling today. And I really took a break. Not so much the weekly TV, but you know, it's not like I walked away from wrestling after this point for any, you know, extended time period. But wow. So do we want to get into the hot summer of 98 with celebrity matches and even a hot fall too, when you think about it?
Yeah.
Karl Malone is going to be wrestling in WCW.
Yes.
And Dennis Rodman is going to be wrestling for the second time in WCW. He had the match in '97, right?
Yeah.
So bringing him back, this maybe is going to be an annual happening now, bringing in Dennis Rodman to wrestle. And you'll have to help me out on the sports front. I guess there's like a real sports rivalry between these two, right?
Well, I mean, here, I'm not a big basketball guy either, but
Okay.
Rodman was the bad boy. You can definitely, you know, you'll see a lot of times last year, like on YouTube or whatever streaming social media things. A lot of basketball players are big wrestling fans. And I'm sure Rodman, you know, with the whole Hollywood thing, and you know, he had the Carmen Electra thing going, that, you know, he probably wanted to be in the NWO, or Hogan wanted him, or Bischoff, somebody wanted him in the NWO.
Hogan
And
wanted to seem cool by hanging
yeah,
out with Dennis Rodman.
he wanted the rub.
Yeah, he definitely would. That was more Hogan getting the rub from Rodman.
And Rodman's was known for being probably one of the best defensive players in basketball. Like, he was not a scorer. He was a guy that led in rebounds, like, quite often. He was your main guy. He was your power forward that was going to, you know, clear the way for other players. And Malone was the opposite. He was that star power forward, you know, that 1-2 punch out of the Utah Jazz, him and John Stockton, you know, one of the great combos. You know, anybody who played NBA Jam at the time would use them a lot. Yeah, Karl Malone was like, he was the mailman. He was, you know, he was a good guy, basically. You know,
The
kept his
monster
nose,
baby face. The power
Yes.
baby face.
So he was the natural, you know, foil for Rodman in terms of if you were going to book it in a wrestling style. Now, I'm not sure if they had like a feud going on the court or something, or off the court, but, you know, you can see anybody, you know, as terms of how they played the game and what they were known for, you can definitely see them having, you know, a rivalry that would extend outside of basketball.
Yeah. So we're going to do a celebrity match, ultimately. It's going to be a tag team match because we need actual wrestlers to anchor this thing. And once again, we've got Dennis the worm, Dennis Rodman, teaming with Hollywood Hogan. And he's going to be going against Karl Malone, teaming with DDP. Of course, this gives us some of those Goldberg's World Heavyweight title win over Hogan happened during this stretch. And I remember DDP and Karl Malone running out to prevent interference by the NWO, which that's got to be so weird for somebody just watching like major title wins or watching like best of Goldberg type stuff, and is like, you just want to see Goldberg smash Hollywood Hogan, and fucking DDP and a basketball player are out there with chairs.
It makes
Like,
as much sense. Yeah, it makes as much sense as Dan Aykroyd at We Are the World. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's one of those, like, if you weren't watching at the time, you're sort of like, what is this? Like, why are they out here? Why is Karl Malone
What is
swinging his
happening?
But anyway, they kind of are instrumental in, preventing a fuck finish to that match.
Mhm.
Goldberg wins, and put some good heat on this, I guess, feud between DDP and Malone and in the NWO. But we get the match at Bash at the Beach. This was the first pay-per-view I ever purchased with my own money. Yep, 1998. I won't call it a disappointment, but my guys do lose the match in the main event. DDP and Karl Malone lose Hollywood Hogan and the Worm, thanks to interference by the Disciple, who basically cost them the match. It's the
Apocalypse.
The stunner / apocalypse, yes, on DDP. So that's a real bummer, but that's okay. We're not going to miss a beat because DDP is going to find a superior celebrity tag team partner, and Jay Leno. Yes, host of the Tonight Show, Jay Leno, in 1998. Leading to such wonderful segments as, what was it called, NWO Tonight, with Eric Bischoff, taking up just seemingly hours of television time on Nitro and Thunder. They have an invasion, in fact, of the actual Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Do you remember? Were you watching any of this? This I was watching live. I remember watching.
Yeah, I remember watching this.
And then being like, I guess I got to watch the Tonight Show now because probably going to be more wrestling.
I don't know if I was a Jay Leno fan at the time, but I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely was watching, I was the one that was recording either Raw or Nitro and watching one live and then watching the other later. I remember they used to replay Nitro. So I think they would replay Nitro right after itself. Fast follow, it's called. And, I would record Raw and then the later Nitro. And then I would just, pick and choose and stuff. And my friend had a hot box at the time. So we weren't paying for pay-per-views, but we were getting to watch them. And I remember this and I thought it was ridiculous. By the way, it's probably out by the time you guys hear this, but there's a Making Mount Rushmore on the Pop feed where we talk about talk shows. Jay Leno does not get love. Actually, a lot of trash talk on Jay Leno as a talk show host and the whole Tonight Show debacles that occurred over the years in terms of the host changing period of time. Anyway, but yes,
one of my co-hosts, Greg Phillips, does a great Jay Leno that I would try to do it, but it would just sound like me trying to do a version of Greg Phillips.
Greg Phillips is a great impersonator.
Oh
Jay Leno, you gotta kind of put your voice up a little bit.
You drive the car.
Yeah, and you kind of stick your tongue into your bottom teeth. That's really, and you go because I had my senior guidance counselor, Brother Grogan, he kind of talked like Jay Leno a little bit. He's like, listen, you guys. You're my little brothers, and let's talk about where you're gonna go to college. Did you study for ACTs and your SATs? And Jay Leno, you gotta kind of put it up a little bit. You gotta put the voice up a little higher. Yes.
I can't do it. I can't do a Jay Leno. But anyway, I will tell you, I did not purchase this pay-per-view. I guess I got enough bang for my buck watching Nitro and Thunder and the Tonight Show, and watching DDP take out Hollywood Hogan and Eric Bischoff on the set of the Tonight Show. Wow, what a wrestling angle that we're running on late night. Man, what were those viewers thinking, you think, in the studio? Did they know that they're going to see a professional wrestler who they've potentially never heard of?
Yes.
Because, I mean, as hot as wrestling is at the time, Diamond Dallas Page would not have been a household name. There would have only been, a couple of household name wrestlers, even at this time period. So, all right, we're gonna train Jay Leno at the power plant. We're gonna get some great footage of him doing collar and elbow tie-ups, a couple headlocks. I think he does a moonsault at one point. I don't know. And yeah, we go into the pay-per-view and he locks up with Hollywood Hogan. Puts puts Hollywood Hogan in a wrist lock. That's what you want to see. That is a terrible pay-per-view, by the way. If you ever have the opportunity to rewatch Road Wild 1998, just don't do it. Don't do that to yourself. I say this as a WCW apologist. I love this stretch of WCW. I think it's incredibly watchable. I love late 90s, especially 97, 98, even a little bit in 99, WCW, all the television. But that Road Wild, that's a shit pay-per-view. It's real bad.
Well, they say the Hoovy Jericho match is the only thing really worth watching, I think.
Yeah, and that's a solid 2 3/4 stars probably. That's what you're topping out at on that show. And this main event was not good. Was not good at all. But Jay Leno does, I guess, prove superior to Karl Malone because the faces win this outing. Kevin Eubanks dropped a pair of diamond cutters. I do remember that. So,
I remember Kevin Eubanks being in pretty good shape. So I think
he was in pretty good shape. I mean, yeah. I guess you couldn't really sell a pay-per-view on it's Diamond Dallas Page and Kevin Eubanks with Jay Leno in their corner. No, you got to make Jay Leno wrestle. But Kevin Eubanks is going to do all the work, and that'll be like the only diamond cutter you see in that match. So that's going to close out the summer of 98, the hot summer of 98 for Diamond Dallas Page, the celebrity summer of 98. Wow. Whew.
Yeah. And we move into the fall where Page wins the War Games main event. He gets a world title shot against the undefeated Goldberg at Halloween Havoc. He does not win that match, but it got high marks. WCW Magazine voted it as the match of the year that year. I don't know who votes for WCW Magazine's matches.
I mean, honestly, I'm trying to... it's not like a high watermark work rate wise in 1998 WCW. Let's face it. I can think of maybe 2 or 3 arguably better matches, but I guess it's notable for being Goldberg's first good, actually pretty good match that isn't just a main event showcase style match. This is a very competitive match for him with a pretty big false finish, where it's oh shit, they might actually pull the trigger on DDP here in this match, where he counters out of that jackhammer with a diamond cutter, which was a very protected finish up to that point. I don't think anybody had actually kicked out of it when he, would go for a cover. But it's one of those very delayed covers, takes him a while getting over for the pin, and sure enough, Goldberg is able to kick out. So I would imagine that our cohort Sean Kidd docked the match about 4 stars for its overindulgence, that kick out there. But no, I mean, this was, I would say, a very earned false finish, very earned kick out. It's not like people are kicking out of finishers left and right in 98 WCW. Certainly not the diamond cutter. I really think this is the first time it had happened, and everybody did the collective oh shit. But yeah, that is a really good match, a shorter match than you probably remember. It's only a 10-minute match, if that, and it feels a lot longer. It feels a lot more epic to me. So that's just a credit to the work DDP had put in that we talked about in getting to this point. He was basically the one out there carrying Goldberg to a good match. And you do not think of Diamond Dallas Page as a carry guy necessarily. He's more the one being led along, working up to someone's level. But no, this is him being the ring general that he had sort of become. And really good stuff there with Goldberg. Going into, World War III, the next night he wins the U.S. title off of Bret Hart. I can't believe I had to drop to this Jersey jackass on Nitro.
The Diamond Dallas Page.
The Diamond Dallas Page, So we get a little mini feud with Bret Hart at the end of the day. I thought they worked pretty well together. I thought they had good chemistry, DDP and heel Bret Hart here in late 98 WCW. They have their rematch at World War III. Now this, for folks keeping count at home, this is the fourth Third World War in WCW. Yes. And final, I do believe. So Page retains there, but would lose the U.S. title back to an injured Bret Hart with help from the Giant, who like choke slams him through the set or something on Nitro. And Bret, he had a groin pull, the likes of which you've never seen, is now the U.S. champ once again for like the third time, even though he can't wrestle. So one of those WCW everybody moments. And then we get DDP and the Giant at Starrcade. So just one of these transitional, like not a major feud, just bridging between programs, I guess, for DDP, which he wins a very cool Diamond Cutter variant. Giant goes to choke slam him off the top rope, and DDP flips into a Diamond Cutter. So I thought that was a neat visual. One of the cooler cutter variants.
Love the reversals into the cutters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that had been established as a thing, like how you can hit it out of nowhere. Like they talk about, Randy Orton and how he's just sort of taken that to extreme levels. And DDP was like the one who got all that started with just out of any position, hitting a Diamond Cutter. Everybody marks out, and always good for a pop.
Yeah. All right. So what do you think is your favorite match though out of this stretch here?
At this point,
we'll go from Starrcade, 97 to the end of 98.
Okay, so from Starrcade 97 to Starrcade 98, I would say my favorite match wouldn't be the best match, but favorite match is going to be that cage match with Raven at Lamboree.
Okay.
Really anything in that Raven. I mean, it could be like it could have been like a random DDP and Benoit tag team against Raven and Saturn. I mean, if you're asking my 14-year-old self, that's from like a random February, March Thunder, is probably my real answer. But in terms of stuff I can actually remember quite well, it's that cage match with Raven.
And then their favorite, I guess, feud of this period of time you enjoyed?
That would be the same Raven feud.
Yeah, the Raven?
Raven and Benoit. Which,
all right.
I mean, it's all one feud to me.
All right. Well, he's about to, move up to another echelon, I guess, in WCW in terms of the titles he's competing for, and actually wins. And we will continue on talking about Diamond Dallas Page with Tim Capel in just a moment. So stick around. We'll be right back.
High five.
Place to Be Nation Wrestling, welcome back to the evolution of Diamond Dallas Page. I'm here with Tim Capel, and Tim is giving us his expertise on his guy that he loves, that brought him back to wrestling fandom back in 1998. And we're going to continue on that, actually, as Diamond Dallas Page moves up the card, so to speak. He already was in the main event, but now he's going to have a little bit of a gold around his waist to justify it. But before we get there, though, let's kind of just talk about what you can hear here on the Place to Be Nation Wrestling Network. We have the Place to Be podcast. That's the mothership of PTBN, where co-host JT Rosero and Scott Criscolo will take you chronologically through the history of WWE. We have the main event, which is co-hosted by Scott Criscolo, Nate Milton, and Steve Willie. They break down all the current events in the world of wrestling. Row 1, Seat 1, hosted by Ben Zani, who shows us an interesting look at the world of small-town wrestling and beyond. Talking WCW, that's one of your shows, Tim. You, Greg Phillips, and Jennifer Smith. Each episode, you pay tribute to the legendary promotion from the Dirty South, where you pick one wrestler, right, and you each pick a match, and then you break them down.
That's exactly what we do. It's sometimes it's a wrestler, sometimes we've done one tag team, so we just did exclusively tag team matches. We can do a concept. We did a War Games episode.
Yes, I remember that.
Yep, so all War Games. I don't know. Perhaps we'll do all celebrity matches. You know, you never know. But it's a one theme per episode of Talking WCW and 3 representatives chosen, one each by the co-host, and we just run through it. Yeah. Wrapped up our most recent episode on the van called Vader.
Yeah. We also have With This Ring, husband and wife Cindy and Ryan Everett discuss specific matches in their random respective fandoms. We have You Don't Know Billy Jack with Drew Rawlaw and his friend Jordan. They watch and discuss some of the greatest pro wrestling matches of all time. Highway to the Impact Zone. That's Logan Crosland and Jacob Williams. They discuss the era of TNA, starting with the birth of the Impact TV show. We have the NWA Saturday Special with Scott and Dr. G. They talk both current and classic NWA stuff. We also have lots of stuff like PTV pay-per-view wrestling shows, Jenny and the Gems. Another one of Tim's shows, PTV NXT. You guys are going chronologically. You started with when NXT started their regular television. Is that correct?
That's right. So we're starting in the year 2014. It's basically their regular show during the network era. So from the launch of the network in 2014, everything NXT on the network and we know there's stuff from prior to the network for NXT, but somebody else can cover that.
Yeah. That is a blind spot for me. I mean, I remember reading about it and I've seen some of it, but I really want to go back. You know, my chrono watches always start and stop, and I'm in a race to finish The Office. Well, at this time, I will have finished it because it was leaving Netflix, going to Peacock, and then I just don't want to get another streaming service. So that's kind of like I get diverted quite often because wrestling is always going to be there. I'm always going to have the network, and I always think like, I can get back to it. Then So also we have the AMS division, Special Relations, Chicken Salad, Senior Video, NWA Crock and Roll, Great Debate Wrestling, which is another one of my shows, an offshoot of the Great Debate that you hear over on the Pop feed. So don't forget to please rate, review, and subscribe. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Just search Place to Be Wrestling Network. And also don't forget, check out the Pop feed, which is my regular home. Lots of great shows there that I am part of, and we have other people that do shows great over there. We have the Year in Pop, Laugh-In Theater, Great Debate, Diamond Conversations, It Was a Thing on TV, A Piece of the Action, Making Mount Rushmore, Blockbuster Rewind. You've been on many of those shows, Tim, and done tremendous jobs.
Thank you. I've enjoyed doing them.
So much fun. Actually, and also we had a great run with the Mandalorian podcast. I really enjoy doing these Pop Goes to the Couch shows. Hopefully at this time we're doing WandaVision as you hear this. I'm hopeful. And I'm hopeful that you will be able to be on one, if not all, of those shows.
Yeah. That's man. So if I have a New Year's resolution to do fewer podcasts next year, then that might be tough. But I don't know that I'll be making that resolution. We'll have to see.
Well, when it comes to Pop Goes the Couch, the one thing we like to try to do is we try to keep the shows shorter than the episode we're covering.
Yeah.
It's a quick hitter and it's usually fresh in your mind. So those are a lot of fun. Also, though, don't forget the other great podcast feeds that Tim has shows on both of. We have Jennifer Smith, The Jenny Position. That's Home with Geek and Sassy. Talkin' Pop, which is a show you co-host with Miss Smith. Freak Out Drive-In, Brother Sister Rewatch, and The Journey Through Infinity. One of my favorite shows that I am not on. I really enjoy listening to you, Jenny, Justin, and Scott break down the MCU. You guys do a tremendous job on that.
Yeah, it started out as us kind of guiding Justin through this world of superheroes and superhero movies, but he has sort of become a master in his own right. So not so much that as it is now just the four of us talking about these movies and reviewing them and saying what worked, what didn't.
Yeah.
We're about we hit the halfway point, I would say, as of our most recent episode there, which was Ant-Man from 2015.
Ant-Man is a tremendous. It was, and you guys put it so well. It was a palate cleanser after Ultron and all that stuff. It's actually and also for anybody that has not watched the MCU, like I remember my girlfriend and her son, who's my son's age, they hadn't seen any of them, and I actually suggested Ant-Man as his introduction because it's family friendly, it's a caper.
Yep.
And they were hooked, and they said, okay, let's go back to the beginning and work our way through, and they did, and they really got caught up all the way. By the time I forgot where they caught up, but we were seeing them in the movies before too long. Yeah. And also, don't forget the North-South connection. That's Justin, Chad, and Aaron bringing you that great feed. It is a home for Wrestling Warzone, No Holds Barred, the Extreme Three-Way Dance, Jeff Learns Wrestling, the Ruthlessly Aggressive Podcast, He Never Dies, and another Tim Capel vehicle that he co-hosts with Jennifer Smith and Sean Kidd, Shrink Wrapped. You want to talk about Shrink Wrapped for a minute?
Yes. So Shrink Wrapped, easy for me to say, the psychology of superheroes, is a show where we sort of take a given character within a given story. It may be across a number of issues. It may be limited to a single issue. But within the context of that story, deconstruct that character's mindset, their psychology, their motivations, what's driving them, what should potentially be done about them. We take an in-universe approach to this. And part of the reason we do that is because we are far from qualified psychologists. But if we can play them on a podcast, then I feel like that gives us some cover. So that's a show. And also it's just more fun and theatrical that way. So it's a little bit artsy. It's a little bit silly. But I just wanted to do a show that would be different from other podcasts. And so that's me and Jenny and Sean Kidd on the North-South Connection podcast feed.
Yes. Also, don't forget, join our Rejuvenated Place to Be discussion group on Facebook. Go to Facebook, look up the Place to Be, and request an invite today. Discussions and fun with wrestling, movies, tournaments, all forms of pop culture. It has been tremendous, a lot of engagement. We've done our first mini tournament. Not sure who won it at this point of this recording because you're hearing this a little later. But whatever it is, congratulations to the best Christmas song that won the tournament. Yeah, but check it out. We have all kinds of a fun posts going on in there, and people seem to really be enjoying it. Also, now that we're in 2021, the 2020 Stretch Project has come to a close, and you will be getting the results weekly on PlaceToBeNation.com. That is the GWCW, a.k.a. the greatest WCW match ever. So everybody broke it down all year. You had to pick your matches, get your list together. I personally don't do one, but I do enjoy the reveal. So I am merely a spectator and an active participant in it. But I do love seeing where things ranked. And I with the previous project, I did go back and visit or revisit in some cases where I didn't remember some matches, and just to see if I would have agreed with that. So Tim, you handed a list in. We will know at this point in time.
Yep.
Yeah. We're talking about Diamond Dallas Page tonight, so I don't want to put too much pressure on you. But roughly how many DDP matches do you think you had in your top 50?
So I'm trying to be objective about this, like in terms of. I didn't used to do like hard star ratings, right? Where you're doing the whole 1 star to potentially 0 stars to 5 stars. And I have embraced that model more and more in recent years, just as kind of a challenge to myself, I guess, as a wrestling fan. And just, it's all subjective at the end of the day, of course, like any art form. But Diamond Dallas Page, as much as I love him, and have a lot of, I don't know, sentimental attachment to his matches. It's hard to say like, oh, this match I love so much is 5 stars or 4.5 stars when it comes to DDP. Like if I'm really getting down to star ratings with him, he's in that comfortable like upper 3 star range. Like he probably tops out at 4, honestly, if I'm being fair. So I don't think he'll occupy a lot of slots on my list. I think I want to give him the nod for that, at least that first Savage match, more for historical significance than match quality. It's a big deal that he goes over Randy Savage, even though they, as I said, kind of tried to walk it back immediately. I feel like. I might have the Goldberg match from Havoc. And I might have a match that we are about to talk about. Mm-hmm. But it's tough to justify a lot of his individual matches for a project of that nature.
All right, cool. So also don't forget to check out the PTB Wrestling Network store. Show off your favorite podcast logos on great merchandise like t-shirts, hoodies, and more. Just go to www.tpublic.com and type PTBW in the search, and it'll take you to our store. And many of the great logos for a lot of the shows you listen to on this very network, you will be hearing. So back to the man, Diamond Dallas Page. We're moving into the year 1999. Where he becomes WCW World Heavyweight Champion in April of that year at Spring Stampede, where he just defeated Sting, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair for the title in a 4-way dance with Macho Man Randy Savage as the special guest referee. He pinned Ric Flair after giving Flair the Diamond Cutter. Around this time, some fans actually were starting to boo Page at events. So shortly after Spring Stampede, the decision was made to turn him heel for the first time in 3 years. The turn played out slowly at first, with Page undergoing a change in attitude. And then on April 19th, Page defended his title against Goldberg, where he then cemented it by first knocking out Goldberg with brass knuckles and then propping his leg up against the ring stairs and repeatedly smashing it with a steel chair, all while taunting the fans with repeated utterances of "Boo me now." He stopped only when Kevin Nash and L.A. Hogan, who was angry at Page for kayfabe injuring Hogan's knee at the match at Spring Stampede, came back from injury and chased him away. So what do you think of this championship match and the heel turn that started? Because Goldberg, had already gone through the undefeated streak was over, everything had happened. And the chink was in the armor, so that angle or that gimmick was done, and they had a little more leeway or room to play with Goldberg. So, what did you think of this little run here?
So, very mixed bag for me at this point, because this is 1999. I'm like all of 15 years old, like kind of still a wrestling mark in the sense that I know it's all. Everything's predetermined, of course, but I still have my biases and still want certain characters to remain a certain way, and I was not loving this DDP heel turn. I remember he had a match with Scott Steiner at Super Brawl in February of '99, where he got taken out. And this was a pretty messed up feud with Steiner making advances at Kimberly, and he throws her out of a moving car at one point, mashes her face on concrete. It's Jesus. And that was a very intense feud, and Page loses the match, gets taken out, and he's on the shelf for about a month. I think it's when he was filming Ready to Rumble. I think it's why they wrote him out for a few weeks. And
he was a heel on that.
And when he's prepared to make his comeback, they do one of those sit down segments with I think it was Okerlund, and he's showing kind of a change in attitude. He's just got a harder edge to him, and he's playing this kind of tweener character, and I'm like, I can work with that, and that's where we are going into that fatal four-way, or excuse me, four-way dance match
That's right.
at Spring Stampede, where he wins his first world title. And you've got some major names in there: Sting, Hogan, Flair. One of these is not like the other, Diamond Dallas Page, but he comes out of that as the champion. And I think it's kind of disjointed, but I think it's a pretty good match for what it is, and given some of the limitations of who's in there. Hogan, like, he leaves mid match with I think it was a shoot injury, to be honest.
Yeah.
But he doesn't even finish the match. Sting, it's his first match back since I think Halloween Havoc, in that terrible Bret Hart match. Flair is, this 1999 Ric Flair, what do you want? So, given the talent involved, I still think it's pretty good. This is what I was alluding to, might make GWCW for me. The time of this recording, not yet final, but we'll see. But I was like, okay, cool. He finally won the big one. But then, like, they're really going from tweener to full heel. And yeah, by the time we get to this segment with Goldberg where he injures him, I'm like, oh shit. So they really turned DDP, like, just as he wins the title. It just kind of took the wind out of my sails, because I wanted him to get that title win at the peak of his powers as a babyface, as the people's champion, made good, essentially. And they kind of pissed it away for the sake of this very, I don't know, by the week armchair kind of booking that they're doing in 99 WCW, which is a whole nother story. But yeah, so we get this kind of weird stretch in the spring where he's feuding with Goldberg and Nash, and Sting is in the mix too. I remember he has a singles match with Hogan at one point. This had to have been before Spring Stampede, because Hogan's out for a while, but they had a singles match on Nitro, and they like trash the set. They trash the big block letters, right? And it was right after that WCW debuted their new logo, the exploding vagina logo.
Yes,
as Tony Schiavone would call it. So that was kind of I don't know why, that's something that kind of sticks out in my mind. But yeah, throughout the spring, he's feuding with that now really upper main event scene. And they do this kind of cool deal where he has a match with Sting on a late April Nitro, and Sting wins the title from him on that Nitro, clean as a sheet. And they do an angle where Sting is going to then defend the title again. Well, defend the title that he had just won on the very same Nitro in the main event. We're going to do another four-way dance match. So he's going to defend it against the guy who won it from, DDP, plus Goldberg, plus Kevin Nash. So mixing it up a little bit from Spring Stampede. And DDP wins the title back on the same night that he lost it. Hits Nash with a foreign object, takes him out with Diamond Cutter. And yeah, so now he is a two-time champion in the span of like a month. So this is kind of crazy. Like car crash TV, even before Vince Russo, really. This is the story of 1999 WCW, I feel like. We get this lame feud with Kevin Nash at Slamboree in a pretty bad match. But yeah, that's where he loses the title. So he only had like a
15 days.
Less than, yeah. I mean, drop in the bucket really, but he's a two-time champion. Losing that belt to Kevin Nash, who himself loses it to Randy Savage like right after. So it's just one of those. We're playing hot potato with the title. DDP was a part of that, but he did get his little run. So that's a feather in his cap, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As you can
And
tell,
then,
I'm not as enthusiastic for this time period.
yeah. Well, also this is the last years or so of WCW. They were
Yeah,
the war was coming to an end, so to speak.
yeah,
And
they are on the downturn now. I mean,
yeah.
we started out the year with the finger poke of doom, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of just been downhill from there. There are some decent matches. I'll give it that, but storylines are fairly incoherent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So shortly after Slamboree, Page enters into an alliance with fellow New Jerseyans, Bam Bam Bigelow, and wins the tag team championship with from then champions Perry Saturn and Raven, thanks to Chris Kanyon turning heel on former ally Raven and costing the team the tag team championships. The trio of them become known as the Jersey Triad because they're all from the Jersey Shore. And through the alliance with WCW president for life, Ric Flair took advantage of the Freebird rule in their subsequent matches. That everybody knows the Freebird rule, meaning any combination of three could defend the titles at any time.
Yep.
They held the titles till June 10th when Saturn and Chris Benoit, now stablemates in the Revolution, took the title from them. They then regained the belts at the Great American Bash 3 days later and then lost in the Harlem Heat at Road Wild. Later that night, Chris Benoit defeated Diamond Dallas Page to retain the United States title. The group broke up shortly thereafter, and Page began feuding with Hogan, again joining Sid Vicious and Rick Steiner in a team effort to take on Hogan, Sting, and Goldberg. Soon after that feud ended, Page turned into a hero again and feuded with both Kanyon and Bigelow before the year ended. So I was kind of excited for the Jersey Triads. I mean, I can remember because one being not from New Jersey, but from New York, it was like, it harkened back to, it reminded me of something. I forget exactly where I could put my finger on it, but it was kind of like something that Paulie would have done in ECW.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was always a big Bam Bam Bigelow mark. So I was.
Yeah, the triple threat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Couple iterations of that in ECW. Sort of same
so I was happy to see him in some kind of a faction over there in WCW that had some kind of a stroke or carriage or something that had, whatever the correct word is there. So what do you think of the Jersey Triad run here?
I sort of dig it more and more in retrospect. At the time, I was just hot and cold on this whole time period. But looking back, I like it because it's a good example of DDP being one of those guys we can slot into that category of being able to play pretty effective babyface and scumbag heel. Started out his career as a scumbag heel and then became the babyface to end all babyfaces, and now has rounded that corner again. Evolved and devolved, you might say. But yeah, he's good at playing that scummy Jersey just dickhead.
Yep.
And it gives Bam Bam Bigelow something to do after kind of wrapping up his on again off again feud with Goldberg. They team up, and I remember it's just the two of them at first that win the tag team titles from Saturn and Kanyon. They had taken Raven out earlier in the night, and so Kanyon stepped in to kind of second for Raven because he'd been hanging out with those two, and Kanyon goes down real easy, so they win, and it turns out that Kanyon was with them all along because after they lose the belts to Benoit and Saturn, that's when the Kanyon turn officially occurs, and he joins DDP and Bigelow. They are now officially known as the Jersey Triad. So all these like shifting allegiances and alliances forming and then crumbling week to week, again, just so indicative of 1999 WCW. But this was one that's kind of had more staying power. I mean, and by staying power, it lasted about 3 months. This is longevity for the time period. But I'll tell you, I watched some of these matches back not too long ago. Various combinations using that Freebird rule, whether it's DDP teaming with Canyon or Bigelow, going up against mainly Benoit and Saturn, produced some pretty decent matches. That come to think of it, that Great American Bash title match where Triad regain the titles, that might make GWCW for me. And thinking back to it and where I think I have it in my mind. So pretty solid stuff there. Then we get DDP challenging for Benoit's U.S. title at Road Wild. And this puts Benoit over really strong. Like, it's a singles match, but they have Benoit take out like the entire Triad in this match. So, and it's pretty decent as a singles match, but I don't know. The two of them just seem like they didn't have the best chemistry in the world, which is weird because you think of Benoit being able to work and just complement basically anyone's style. And I mean, their matches are fine, but it seems like they really could have taken it to the next level, and they just never got there. But yeah, and then that fall, we're wrapping up the Triad. This kind of quasi alliance between Sid Vicious and Rick Steiner. Wow. That's not really lighting the world on fire.
No.
But I know that this is where we get a feud between DDP and Ric Flair, and they have a singles match, a strap match, in fact, at Halloween Havoc of '99, which is like the only decent match on that card. It is such a terrible pay-per-view. But that is the one match that is like kind of decent and lives up to the story that had been presented. Like it does kind of live up to the hype such that it was going into it. Basically it's Ric Flair making advantage Scott Steiner was earlier in the year, except there's the babyface in the feud. And that turns around when David Flair begins stalking Kimberly, because at that point, no, we can't tolerate this. Ric Flair is one thing, but not his great value son. Come on. And
Yes.
and that's where DDP kind of turns face again, because now he's defending Kimberly's honor against not the Nature Boy, but his ain't shit son. So that's how we end the year, kind of on a bit of a whimper. Like DDP and David Flair in I think it was a crowbar on a pole match at Starrcade. Not a career highlight, I would say.
No. So now we're getting into actually a blind spot for me, because 2000 was a busy year for me in my personal life, which I won't get into on this show. But in 2000, with WCW under new management, Page earned a shot at the vacant World Heavyweight title belt at Spring Stampede against Jeff Jarrett. In a surprise twist, though, Page's wife Kimberly then turns on Page, helps Jarrett become the new champion. Page gets to bury Jarrett on April 24th episode of Nitro, where he defeats Jarrett in a steel cage match to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion for a third time. He then lost the title to his tag team partner, actor. This all goes on. You can't make this up. I mean, I literally could not write this in like my wildest dreams. Actor David Arquette.
Yeah.
3 days later on Thunder, the rules stated whoever got the pin would win the title, and Arquette had pinned Jarrett's partner, Eric Bischoff. Page attempted to win the title back at Slamboree later that month in a triple cage match against Arquette and Jarrett, but lost after Arquette hit him with a guitar. Page then enters a feud with Mike Awesome, who defeated him in an ambulance match at the Great American Bash after Canyon turns on Page. So, the David Arquette tenure as WCW World Heavyweight Champion that had Page heavily involved in it. So, Tim, what about this period? This is This is grasping at straws here for WCW.
It's grasping, certainly. All right, so this all starts with the Millionaires Club versus the
New Blood. Yeah, I remember that a little bit.
Yeah, and DDP was sort of I don't know. He was almost like because Vince Russo is gonna basically reuse his ideas and his characters and gimmicks from WWF, and he was kind of treating DDP like WCW's version of Stone Cold Steve Austin. I felt like, because he was the main event top guy, getting the world title matches out of the New Blood for some reason, even though you know got Hogan and Flair and Luger and all these big names. It's DDP that Russo is kind of getting behind. So they are baby faces, which defies logic a bit. But 2000 WCW has this match with Jarrett where Kimberly turns, and this feels like history repeating itself, where he loses everything to Johnny B. Bad in 1995, 1996, loses his title, loses his girl, loses his money, loses his dignity. Like, we're sort of doing all this again, break him down to build him back up. Loses the title match, loses Kimberly, loses boyfriend Canyon, loses his back. He breaks his back at one point, pretty much. Like having a match with Mike Awesome that puts him on the shelf. Ambulance match, yes, it was an ambulance match that they had. So he's lost everything once again. His friendship with David Arquette. I can remember people trying to defend this at the time, just on the basis of, any publicity is good publicity. And especially when you're WCW in 2000, you'll take any eyes on the product you can get. That said, it's not like David Arquette is like this big marquee actor. Like, it's who really cares that David Arquette is winning wrestling championships, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you're gonna do this, make it like just a bigger star, like, I don't know. Maybe he's all they could pull at the time. And I say this with, like, it sounds really shitty, and I'm not saying it with any, like, disrespect towards David Arquette. He's just, hired, brought in to do all this stuff. He's like a legit wrestling fan. I believe he donated what he was paid by WCW to some, like, downtrodden wrestlers foundation. I don't know what it was exactly, but you know what I mean. Like, he basically gave his money to charity. He was like a solid dude who is remembered as scum of the earth because he won the WCW World Heavyweight Championship in a meaningless tag team match. So I kind of feel bad for the guy. And that led to the Triple Cage match, which is sort of not as exciting as you would think, the way it's presented. The big spot there was Canyon taking the Owen Hart fall, essentially. It's in the same arena. About, a little bit over a year later, or was it even a year later? Gosh. It was like the same month a year ago that Owen Hart had died. So, in good taste there. Good job.
Yeah.
And then they reveal that Canyon was with them all along. So I'm kind of confused. So are we saying that he really he took that bump and then he decided that it was better to have Mike Awesome as a friend than an enemy, or was he with Mike Awesome from the start and just took that dive as a stuntman and wasn't really injured? I couldn't tell you. I don't know if Vince Russo could tell you, but that's what happened. And DDP went on the shelf with a legit injury after that ambulance match, I remember, with Mike Awesome. I don't remember anything about the match. I just remember he was out for a while afterwards.
Let me tell you something, bro. So yeah, like he said, he took some time off, but he comes back in 2000. He forms a tag team with Kevin Nash called the Insiders and won the tag team championships on November 26th at Mayhem. They defeated the Perfect Event, which was made up of Sean Stasiak and Chuck Palumbo. They were temporarily stripped of the titles, but won them back at Starrcade, defeating Stasiak and Palumbo again. They then lost the titles to Palumbo and Sean O'Haire in January at Sin and broke up shortly thereafter. After his tag run, a briefly feud with the returning Canyon, which saw Canyon defeat Page at Super Brawl Revenge, and Page defeating Canyon the following night on Nitro, ending their feud. He then moved on to the WCW Championship picture again, facing Scott Steiner. The feud hit a climax at the final WCW pay-per-view, Greed, which saw Page's final match in WCW and a semi-burial type defeat as he passed out in Steiner's finish, the Steiner Clan. So that was his swan song in the swan song of WCW.
Right.
So, well, what are your opinions of these last few months?
Look, this reinforces my theory. As goes Diamond Dallas Page, so goes WCW. I remember being as checked out on the promotion as I had ever been after Great American Bash. Like, that leads to the awful Bash at the Beach, notable at least for Booker T winning his first world championship. But that's like the only bright spot in this promotion during that time frame. Like, New Blood Rising in August is like an all-time bad pay-per-view. You had that Fall Brawl in September, which has like a good Goldberg-Steiner match, but nothing else going for it. Like an all-time bad Halloween Havoc. And it's just like, I was not keeping up with WCW through all that. There's just no way. And I didn't think they'd ever get me back. But they started doing this Natural Born Thrillers faction, started doing booking like a actual wrestling promotion that had some logic and sense to it. DDP comes back, teams with Nash as this tag team. I kind of dug this little team. The Insiders. I thought they put on some good matches. Nash, being as limited as he was at that point, working as a hot tag guy really suited him. And I thought they turned in some decent performances against, Palumbo and Stasiak and those dudes. And it's just weird that whole generation of up and coming talent is just like completely forgotten. They just never made it. And I think we're a case of poor timing. But yeah, those like at Mayhem and then at Starrcade, those are some solid outings there. Sin is like not a bad pay-per-view at all. And those last few months of WCW, they were really getting their act together, but it was just too little, too late, unfortunately. Great little run at that Super Brawl Revenge, where in back-to-back matches, it's DDP going up against Canyon, loses that match, and then has to face Jarrett, who he defeats. I always thought DDP and Jarrett kind of had decent chemistry. And then going up against Steiner at the last pay-per-view, I wouldn't call it a semi-burial. Burial. That was just Steiner on his like main event run of killing all the baby faces, because they're setting him up as the big bad heel of the promotion. And he was going to take out all the other main eventers. So he had taken out Nash. I think he'd taken out Sting or Booker. So this was DDP getting his turn. And we go into the last Nitro after that, which sadly DDP is not a part of, because he's still selling the beating that he took. So it's unfortunate he's not on that show, but I get it.
Yeah, kind of. I really wish he should have been. I mean, I know they tried to kind of to do right by WCW that night by
It's still
closing
a
it with.
stacked show. They still do like a lot of fan service on that.
Mm-hmm. They close with the Sting Flair match,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get the whole Shane, pulling the rug out from under his father stuff. So
they switch a bunch of titles. They switch all the titles to babyfaces basically. So
yeah,
it's supposed to be just kind of a feel good last hurrah sort of thing.
So then it was, WCW was purchased by WWF owner Vince McMahon in 2001. He was one of the few major stars, along with Booker T and Bagwell, who accepted buyouts of their AOL Time Warner contracts so they could immediately sign with McMahon. He takes a little while to debut. They mostly bring in guys who are kind of like, mid-carders at best.
Yeah, because they know that they're still going to get over. They're still going to get huge pops. It's a hot angle, so it's sort of like don't unload everything in the barrel at once. I understand the rationale to that.
Well, plus you also had, like we said, your Nashes and Halls and Hogan's and all those guys all sitting out, getting their fat contract.
I think the problem I think the problem is we all sort of assumed as fans that we'd be getting to those guys eventually, but because of those contracts, it was like they had no intention of signing them until those contracts were up. They weren't going to buy them out.
No, I wouldn't have, But so he debuts on the Raw on June 18th, 2001, where he unveiled himself as the stalker of The Undertaker's then wife, Sarah. He revealed he didn't care about Sarah. He only did it to make an impact and wanted to take on the biggest dog in the yard. At King of the Ring, he fought The Undertaker in an unsanctioned brawl that was never announced as an official match. I remember him telling The Undertaker, "Go ahead, make me famous."
Make me famous, yeah. I remember that. So most people hate this, right? I will say that I thought it could have worked at first, especially when he proclaimed that he didn't give a shit about Sarah. It was all just to get himself over. Like, I think that's kind of a workable angle for him. But then they turned it into, I really did get obsessed with Sarah. Like, I worked myself into a shoot, and then they do this whole deal where he's got like a shrine to her backstage, which... no. Now we're losing the plot here.
Yeah, it was kind of out there. It would have been a better angle with somebody else, I think, not Paige. I mean, I'd have to really sit down and think about like how I would have brought Paige in, say for this. So then on the July 5th episode of SmackDown,
like I said, I think if they had just stuck to, I never gave a shit about Sarah. I'm going to be a thorn in the side of The Undertaker and have him feud with Undertaker without getting buried and without all the Sarah nonsense. I think that could have worked. Just use the stalker as kind of his in, but just drop it after that. Because they could have just done basically like how they say, like, how do you survive in prison? You walk up to the baddest guy and you just, you try to take him. He could have just done that. Yep.
Just came in out of the crowd, diamond cutters, The Undertaker, and runs out. Boom. Instant feud started. They could keep it simple. Not
exactly.
have to do all this stuff.
We never mentioned Sarah again. Yeah. I think that could have worked.
It was like we, removed her tattoo from our memory.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Just like Undertaker, just erase her.
Yes. So then on July 5th, on SmackDown, he competes against the WCW Heavyweight Champion, Booker T, but fails to win the title after a distraction from The Undertaker. On the July 9th episode of Raw, WCW owner Shane McMahon, ECW owner Paul Heyman joined together to create the alliance, with former WCW and ECW alumni joining forces in an attempt to take control of the WWF. This is one of my favorite episodes of Raw of all time, because you slowly start to put together what's going on before they reveal it, if you've been watching wrestling, because you see like that. I don't remember who was in that match exactly, but I know there was Jericho and there was Kane right in there. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you see all these guys
You realize all the WCW guys
they're all ECW alumni.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and they all do that turn. They all turn around, and I'm like, I think I lost it when I was watching this live. But, yeah, I thought that was great. So then at the Invasion pay-per-view, Paige was part of Team Alliance with Booker T, Rhino, and the Dudleys defeating Team WWF after Team WWF member Stone Cold Steve Austin turned on his team members mid-match. Paige and Kanyon reunite on the August 6th episode of Raw, where Kanyon helped Paige attack The Undertaker backstage. 3 days later, at the August 9th taping of SmackDown, Paige and Kanyon defeat the APA to win the WWF Tag Team titles. His feud with The Undertaker culminated when The Undertaker and Kane defeated Paige and Kanyon at SummerSlam in August 19, 2001 in a steel cage match for the WWF Tag Team titles. During the match, Paige was injured, keeping him out of action until late October. While he was injured, he developed a new gimmick in which he became a motivational speaker. The character involved Paige constantly smiling and acting optimistic. And with his trademark phrase, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. So what do you think of this, the whole alliance and, well, more importantly, Paige's involvement in the alliance?
I mean, he should have been treated like a top guy, and he just wasn't. He was, other than Booker T, and, I mean, Bagwell flamed out immediately.
Yeah.
He was one of the few who actually did take the buyout. I remember it was reported to be something like 50 cents on the dollar, which, he could have just kept collecting that fat paycheck from Time Warner, but no, he wanted to keep working, wanted to, make an impact in the WWF, but we see how it gets treated. Just like that's the story of the alliance. They're going to get buried. Everybody's been over this 1,000 times. Everybody's rebooked the invasion, how they should have done it. I mean, I can't really say anything original or unique on that point. I did like that they put him back with Kanyon. If you're going to have him work tag matches, then if Kanyon is going to be involved, I remember they were booking him and promoting him as like the MVP of the alliance was the line that they were using. But I like that kind of helped Kanyon get over. Again, wish that they had been programmed stronger, against Undertaker and Kane, especially that cage match at SummerSlam is pretty rough. Not fun to revisit. I believe that Sarah Undertaker gets a pinfall victory over DDP at some point in the stretch. A lot of people hate that, but I'm not going to rant about it because, again, it's been said. So yeah, just real missed opportunity, especially given what limited shelf life he had by then. We talked about he was 35 when he debuted as a wrestler. He's in his 40s when he gets the biggest push of his career. And now, God, he's probably coming up on 45, 46.
Around there.
And still wrestling. This is where he ought to be winded down, if not out of the ring entirely, and they're jerking him around with all this bullshit. Then the whole motivational speaker thing, I don't know. It felt like a rib. It just felt like one of those ribs that they would pull on a guy based on his real life persona.
Yeah. That
he manages to get over in spite of them, essentially, is the way that I looked at it. Because that did sort of get him over when it was supposed to be this obnoxious motivational speaker gimmick where he's, preaching positivity all the time. That shouldn't play well with crowds, but people just sort of took to it.
Yeah, I remember that stuff going on. And then he returned. His televised match return was on November 3rd at Rebellion. He lost to the Big Show, and then after the Alliance loses at Survivor Series, Paige, along with the rest of the Alliance members on kayfabe, lose their jobs. He eventually returns as a face and wins his job back by defeating the Big Boss Man in January of 2002 on an episode of SmackDown. He competes in the Royal Rumble that January later on, and he does not win. He becomes the European champion on January 31st, 2002, on an episode of SmackDown where he defeats Christian as a former follower of his positive philosophy. At WrestleMania 18, he successfully retained in a rematch against Christian. However, he loses the title to William Regal on an episode of SmackDown that airs on March 21st. On March 25th, he was drafted to SmackDown as part of the the 2002 draft lottery. On an episode of SmackDown on April 18th, he sustains a serious neck injury during a match with Hardcore Holly after botching a superplex. After receiving opinions from multiple doctors, he announces retirement in June of 2002 and leaves the promotion soon thereafter. So he did get a title during his WWF run. It was the European title, but a fun little mini feud with Christian. What do you think of this? The end of this run here?
It's unremarkable. I do like that match with Christian at Mania 18. I think it's a good little. I won't go so far as to say a hidden gem, but it's one of those matches you go, oh yeah, that's on the show. I'll watch it. It's not one that you immediately just blow past. It's not bad. I have very little recollection of this stuff with Regal and then him getting drafted to SmackDown. I do remember the spot with Hardcore Holly, that superplex, where he gets injured, because it struck me as looking pretty bad even at the time, because he folded up like an accordion. I think he was delivering the superplex to Holly, but just went up way too high and came down on like the back of his neck largely. And being like the big teenage mark that I was for DDP at the time, I was subscribed to his newsletter, which it was just emails just an email type. This was before blogs had really taken off. So before you had an actual dedicated blog, you would just send an email newsletter around. And so he'd do about once a week, once a month, whatever. And he said, yeah, basically my neck is really fucked. I got an x-ray, got an MRI, and the doctors told me that they couldn't actually do a vertebrae fusion because I had so many vertebrae that had already fused on their own, basically, without surgery. So there's nothing they could do at that point. And his mobility was just so limited, and he wasn't going to get it back. So decided to call it a career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then he returns to wrestling in 2004. He does some indie stuff, and his first match was on April 21st. He teamed with Satoshi Kojima as they lost to former WCW star Sting and Great Muta for HCW Battle Hawaii. He then signs with TNA, Total Nonstop Wrestling. He debuts for the company in November of that year on a taping of Impact where he attacks Raven, beginning a feud between the two. He then, competes against him at Turning Point in December, where he defeats him. And then in January, at Final Resolution, he takes part in a three-way elimination match, determining number one contender, where he goes up against Monty Brown and Kevin Nash, which was won by Brown. Page and Brown subsequently formed a tag team. Then at All Odds, Page and Brown defeats Team Canada, Bobby Roode and Eric Young. He then receives an NWA World Heavyweight Championship title shot on March 13th at Destination X, but was defeated by reigning champion Jeff Jarrett when Monty Brown turns heel and hits Page with the pounce. At Lockdown, Page teams with BG James and Sean Waltman to defeat Jeff Jarrett, Monty Brown, and the Outlaw in a lethal lockdown match. And then at Hard Justice, on May 15th, Page and Ron Killings faced Monty Brown and the Outlaw, where they were defeated in what was Page's final match in TNA. Page left TNA shortly thereafter to pursue an acting career. So, Tim, did you watch any of this this period of time? Because I was aware of TNA, but I hadn't watched anything at that. And I think they were still doing that six-sided ring, which really, I mentioned this before, that really turned me off. It bothered me. I know they were trying to be different, but that's not how you do it.
I remember going out of my way to see some of these matches just out of curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
what I was like, how is Diamond Dallas Page how is he making a wrestling comeback with, his spine being in the condition that it is? But it's, I guess with enough time off, he felt like he could go again, but he has this little cup of coffee in TNA. TNA was hard to watch during the stretch because this is after their weekly pay-per-view run, but prior to the TV deal with Spike. So what are they doing? Like what was it, Fox Sportsnet or something?
Yeah, they had bounced around a little bit, I think, at this time.
I think they were even, they were internet exclusive for a little while. So yeah, I did go out of my way to just watch some of these matches out of curiosity. Again, we're seeing full circle, wrestling Raven, wrestling Jeff Jarrett, all these guys he's got history with. But yeah, I remember liking what I saw of it. Not expecting it to blow me away or anything. This is a man in his like late 40s now.
Yes.
Wrestling. What do you want? But it seemed fine. I kind of want to go back and revisit it.
Yep. Then he bounced around the different independents, where he wrestles a Wrestle Reunion against Zbyszko. He had Bruno in his corner. He then defeats Buff Bagwell at GLCW. All kinds of. He wrestles Juggalo. He makes an appearance for Juggalo Championship Wrestling in August of 2009, and in 2010, he teams with Air Paris.
Yeah.
To go against Bobby Hayes and Alexander the Great at a PICW event. Yeah, all kinds. And then he teams with Kevin Nash and they defeat the Rock and Roll Express at the AWE Night of Legends in 2011. Actually, and then he agrees to work with WWE in 2010, and it starts appearing on DVDs and promotional appearances, Legends deal kind of stuff. And then on a great episode of Raw, which they did in July of 2012, they did it was a show with Legends, and where they kept having Legends kind of beat up Heath Slater, and he comes out and hits a diamond cutter on him, which I thought was a fun thing. And then he appears at Raw 1000 and he appears with other Legends during Slater's match with Lita. And then he participates on Old School Raw, which is in 2014. And then on April 5th, he inducted his wrestling mentor and new DDP yoga practitioner, Jake Roberts, into the WWE Hall of Fame. And then at the Royal Rumble in 2015, he's a surprise entering at 14, where he would hit his finishing move, the Diamond Cutter on Stardust, Bray Wyatt, and Fandango from the top rope before being eliminated by Rusev. And then he competes in the WrestleMania 22 Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. He was eliminated by Connor.
I remember him being in that Battle Royal. In some ways, some people might say WrestleMania 32 is still going. So
yes, oh god,
it wasn't that long ago.
No,
when you think about it, because it's quite endless.
Yes, and then on March 31st, 2017, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And then he's still making appearances. Now he was at All In September of 2018, where he accompanied Cody Rhodes in his match against Nick Aldis, and he's made appearances for AEW. And he was there last year in 2019 in Page Return to Dynamite.
Yes, he wrestled for AEW.
Yes,
as recently as last year.
Yes. Actually, in January 15th of 2020, he at Bachelor Beach, he had his first match since the Andre Battle Royal.
Oh my God! I thought it was last year.
Well, it is last year. We're taping this. It's the same year, but when you're hearing this, it's last year.
Oh, so I'm still right. Very good.
You're still right, Tim. You're always right.
For different
reasons. He teams with Dustin Rose and QT Marshall to take on MJF, the Butcher of the Blade, in a losing effort. And of course, we all know about the DDP Yoga. I own the DVDs. Have I ever put them in my DVD player or my PS4? Nope. I gotta get to it. I know our friend Justin is a big practitioner, and I think Scott Criscolo has them and has used them. It's something I think I need to have a little bit more of in my life and less fat shittery. So I think I'm going to give them a try. I mean, it looks fun, and you gotta say, Page's biggest accomplishment, I think, is the fact that he's a guy that is known for cleaning up and helping other wrestlers. Oh, yeah. He helped turn Scott Hall around. He helped turn Jake Roberts around. So what do you think, of him in his these I guess we want to call it the later twilight years of being involved in the wrestling business and his behind the scenes work. When he's returned to WWE and had a working relationship with them, and talk about his Hall of Fame induction if you have any memories of that.
Well deserved. It's one of those, like, because he's done so much to give back to the industry, you sort of don't really care what his WWF/E in-ring career was. Like, that's kind of immaterial when you look at just his service to this community. As you said, basically doing the impossible of fixing Scott Hall, fixing Jake Roberts. And I know, he'd be the first to say it's really all on them, but he was able to get through to them in ways that others hadn't. Like, this was not their first rodeo as far as rehab and recovery and trying to turn their lives around, but for whatever reason, this is what stuck. So, I mean, for that alone, that's a Hall of Fame worthy feat. I feel like I can remember it seemed like any day you were just waiting to hear Jake Roberts found dead in a hotel room kind of thing.
Scott Hall, same.
Yeah, sure. And the fact that both of those guys are not only still alive but clean today, huge credit to what DDP has put out there into the world. It's also, I feel like, very vindicating in a way, because DDP had a lot of haters. You go back to the late 90s, as I talked about before, everybody thought he was a butt kisser, he's a brown noser, he's insincere, like he's stealing spots from guys who are more deserving and politicking in the back and just all this shit, right? Just constant shit heaped on him. And it turns out, like, all the ways that he really presented himself as kind of this ultimate good guy, has really panned out. Like, it wasn't all for show. He really is as impossibly sincere as he kind of made himself out to be. And I get that that's hard for people to accept. And this is wrestling. I'll allow for the fact that there is still time for him to murder-suicide his whole family, I guess. But for the most part, he seems to be one of the true, rare feel-good stories in professional wrestling. And that, he put in the work, he got over, he was a huge success, and managed to get out with his life and his health intact.
Yeah, tremendous story.
Which is a credit in and of itself, but what he's given back is just, honestly, that's just a bonus. But yeah, I just think he's an actual feel-good success story.
Yeah, and like you said, we're surprised because we've, anybody who's a wrestling fan like we are, and other people, who are part of Place to Be Nation, listen to the pods and everything else, about, the demons, I guess, that a lot of wrestlers have. Every year we expect at least a handful of wrestlers to die young prematurely from various, demons or what have you. And the fact that Scott Hall and Jake Roberts, two guys that were noted having lots of issues. I mean, Jake had drug issues for many years. Scott Hall, an alcoholic. That these guys are still with us and can give, yes, they had to do the work and get clean themselves, but DDP kind of provided them with the vehicle to do so.
The accountability crib.
Yeah. So great stuff. Are there anything maybe that we hadn't mentioned about DDP? Any matches you want to maybe reiterate that people should seek out if they want to see some great stuff from DDP?
I think we're pretty comprehensive. Yeah. Check out the Goldberg match at Havoc. Check out the Randy Savage series, including that La Parka match from Nitro. His title win is definitely up there. His tag stuff in '99, I think, is overlooked, but holds up pretty well. Good stuff with Jarrett and like the abomination of a year that was 2000. I thought they had okay ring work, him and Jarrett.
Mm-hmm.
Raven feud, of course. But yeah, I think that probably should do it.
All right, cool. All right, so Tim, what can you direct people to? I mean, we are taping this a little out from the actual air date, so your social medias and shows you regularly appear on. I know we mentioned a lot of them earlier, but just give them again so people can make sure they tune in and download, stream however they want to listen.
Yeah, so on Place to Be Nation Wrestling, I would say check out Talkin' WCW if you are a WCW fan. The aforementioned Talkin' WCW with myself, Jennifer Smith, and Sean Kidd. Over on, and also on Place to Be Nation Wrestling, PTB NXT, myself, Jennifer Smith, and Jacob Williams. So if you're a PTB fan or a WCW fan, I've got some shows for you. And then on the Jenny Position podcast feed, I co-host Talkin' Pop. That's me and Jennifer Smith, usually with a guest, sometimes not. And The Journey Through Infinity, which is me, Jenny, Justin, and Scott Criscolo. Also on the North-South Connection podcast feed, Shrink Wrapped, The Psychology of Superheroes, myself, Jennifer Smith, and Sean Kidd. So check all those shows out if you're a comics fan, wrestling fan of life and culture, I guess. Usually dumpster fire culture, but there should be something for you. My social media on Twitter is @Psych68, CYKE68, if you would like to follow me there.
All right. Great stuff. As for me here on the Place to Be Nation Wrestling Network, Evolution, this is a kind of a quarterly show, so I'm not sure yet who our next guest will be or our next subject we are going to profile, but stay tuned to the social medias and all that kind of stuff, and we'll get that to you probably sometime late winter, early spring will be our next episode, as well as, bi-monthly, I would say, you will see Great Debate Wrestling. That is usually myself and about 3 or 4 guests. I've changed the format slightly where I've shortened that, and I shortened the pop version to 1 segment an hour, and it's made the show a lot tighter, so I really am happy with that change. Everybody's got to adapt and evolve. Also, check me out on the Place to Be Nation Pop feed. New episodes of Laugh-In Theater drop probably once or twice a month. You have my monthly shows, which are Blockbuster Rewind, as well as Making Mount Rushmore, which drops every other Monday with a different panel every episode. Tim has been on that show and been tremendous. Hopefully he will be back on a future episode, as well as we have Pop Goes the Classics. That's myself, Miranda, and Steve Riddle. We talk about Disney animated films. By the time you hear this, we will be in the 1950s talking about movies such as Peter Pan, and I forgot what's after Peter Pan, but on our docket, I think 101 Dalmatians. But so we're moving along through those. Having being the mid part of time zones. I have one co-host that is 6 hours ahead of me, and another one 3 hours behind, making them 9 hours apart. It makes scheduling our record times difficult, so keep an eye out for those, as well as the brand new trivia pod that should be happening by the time you hear this, PTBN Trivia Night. That's right, we have 9 episodes of themed games, where if you win an episode, you will move on to the semifinals. There will be 3 semifinal matches, and if you win that, you move on to the finals, and you win the finals, you are the first PTBN Trivia Night champion, and you will actually receive your very own championship belt for your efforts. So check that out. If we're still looking for contestants, hit me up. If not, tune in every other Friday when the show will drop. Also, don't forget, check out the Place to Be podcast page on Facebook, the group. Lots of fun stuff going on there all the time. Check out the website. That's where all the pods from all the feeds are featured, as well as a bunch of recurring articles like This Week in WWE, the SmackDown and Fox Report, Paulie's Perspective, Steve's Disney animated reviews. We also have Matt Patella's reviews of the live action movies. Lots of good stuff. And also, don't forget, check out all the feeds. And don't forget, and go to the store as well. Get yourself some PTBN wrestling merch. So, with all that, I want to say a big thank you to Tim Capel for coming on and breaking down the career of the one and the only Diamond Dallas Page. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, and for those of you out there, thank you for listening, and we'll check you out on the next episode of Evolution. Take care, everybody.